It started with the rain, not the polite drizzle you sometimes get in spring, but a thick, relentless downpour that turned the highway into a ribbon of silver. I hadn't planned on staying anywhere that night. I was just driving, trying to get somewhere, anywhere, away from the city and the noise that had been following me for weeks. But the rain made the world smaller, claustrophobic. The headlights barely cut through it, and the windshield wipers worked slower than they should, like they were tired of trying. Somewhere on the outskirts of a town I couldn't even name, I saw the sign. A flickering neon motel sign, half the letters burnt out. Evergreen Motel, it said, or maybe it was Everglow. The rain made it hard to tell. It didn't matter. I needed somewhere dry, somewhere I could stop and rest. The drive up the long, empty driveway was harder than it should have been. Puddles swallowed the tires with a loud splash that made me jump every time. The trees on either side pressed in like dark fingers, and I had the sudden, unshakable feeling that someone or something was watching me from the shadows. I told myself it was just my nerves. The rain had been driving me a little crazy. When I pulled up to the office, I realized how quiet everything was. Too quiet. The neon sign flickered in the rain like a warning. The building itself looked almost abandoned. Paint peeling off the walls, a faded welcome mat curled up at the corners. Not a car in sight, not a person anywhere. I grabbed my bag and stepped out. The rain hit me like a wall, soaking me in seconds, cold and sharp. The office door creaked as I pushed it open. Inside, the air was thick and smelled like wet carpet and old wood. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, one flickering, casting shadows that jumped across the walls. The receptionist's desk was empty. I called out, my voice sounding absurdly loud in the stillness. "Hello?" A movement at the back made me jump. A man, or maybe he was a man, stood there, half hidden in the shadows. He was older, thin, wearing a uniform that looked like it hadn't been washed in months. His eyes didn't focus on me at first. He was staring past me, somewhere beyond the office, like he was waiting for something. "Yes," he said finally, voice flat, like he had been asked the same question 1,000 times and didn't care about the answer. I need a room," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I was soaked, cold, and tired, and every nerve in my body was on edge. He nodded slowly, shuffled some papers, then looked at me again. But his eyes didn't really look at me. He was looking through me, or maybe past me. "We do have one," he said. His mouth moved, but there was something off about it. A strange delay, like his words didn't belong to him. I followed him down the narrow hallway to the back. The place smelled worse than the office, musty, damp, like it hadn't seen fresh air in years. The hallway lights flickered and the floor creaked under every step. My reflection in the mirrors along the walls looked pale, ghostly, and I kept thinking I saw movement behind me. But when I turned, there was nothing. The room he handed me was at the end of the hall. Room 12. The key felt heavy in my hand and the door opened with a groan. Inside it was simple. A bed, a small desk, a TV that looked like it hadn't worked in a decade. The window overlooked the parking lot where the rain fell in sheets, drowning the world in gray. I dropped my bag and just stood there listening. There was silence, but it wasn't comfortable. It was the kind of silence that felt aware, like the walls themselves were waiting. I could hear the rain hitting the roof, the slow drip from somewhere inside the ceiling, and something else, something subtle, a faint creak or scuff, like someone or something was moving just out of sight. I shook my head, trying to make sense of it. I was exhausted, rain-soaked, tired, and probably imagining things. I unpacked a little, trying to create a sense of normalcy. I set my phone on the desk. No signal, not even one bar. That was fine. I didn't want distractions. Just sleep, warm and safe, away from the storm, but sleep didn't come easily. The room felt wrong. I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone, that the shadows in the corners were too heavy, too thick. I tried to read, tried to watch the TV, but the static seemed to fill the room, humming low, like a warning I didn't understand. At some point, I went to the window. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, but the world outside was gray and empty. The parking lot stretched into nothing. No cars, no people. Just me and the motel, the rain, and the dark trees beyond. I saw movement, or thought I did, a figure standing under the neon sign. I blinked. Gone. I convinced myself it was a trick of the rain, my mind playing games. But then I noticed the lobby light flicker. Not the one above the office, another one, somewhere else. And I realized the office had been empty when I walked in. No one could have been moving it. I went back to the bed, tried to lie down, but every shadow seemed to shift when I blinked. Every sound in the walls, the floorboards, even the pipes felt deliberate, like they were trying to tell me something. My heartbeat drummed in my ears, loud, frantic. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time didn't feel real. I could hear the wind outside, the rain trying to return, the ceiling drip, and a faint scratching, like fingernails or claws, across the wood somewhere in the building. I stayed frozen, staring at the ceiling, counting my breaths, trying to convince myself I wasn't losing it. Finally, I got up and walked the room, touching the walls. The furniture. Nothing. Just a normal room. But the normality was wrong. Too quiet, too empty. Every shadow seemed a little too dark. Every reflection a little too alive. The room felt like it was breathing around me. I went to the bathroom and looked in the mirror. My reflection was pale, tired, my eyes wide. Behind me, nothing. But I felt a presence pressing on my back, cold and patient. I turned quickly. The room was empty, but the air felt thick, heavy, like the silence was watching me, judging me. I didn't know how long I stayed awake. Hours, probably. The storm outside never stopped, and the motel never changed. It didn't feel abandoned exactly, but it didn't feel alive either. Just waiting. For me, maybe. Eventually, I lay down, staring at the ceiling, trying to make sense of everything. The rain hammered against the window, the pipes groaned, the wind whispered in ways I couldn't understand. Somewhere in the walls, something moved. And I knew somehow that the motel didn't belong to the world outside, not really. It was its own place, its own time. Sleep didn't come, but exhaustion did. And I dreamed, finally. Though the dreams were thin, like smoke curling through a dark room. I dreamt of hallways that stretched forever, of doors that opened to nowhere, of voices whispering my name just beyond hearing. When I woke, the rain had stopped. The world outside was pale and wet, the sky a dull gray. I got up shakily and looked out the window. The parking lot was empty. The neon sign flickered weakly. No one was around. Not that I'd expected anyone to be, but even then I couldn't shake it. The feeling that I was being watched, that the motel had been waiting for me like it always knew I would come. I told myself it was just nerves, the storm, the exhaustion. But I knew better. Somewhere in the silence, in the shadows, in the walls that creaked and groaned, the motel was alive. And I had just arrived. After the first night, I didn't know what I expected. Some kind of normal morning, maybe, a few birds, a distant car on the highway, the motel slowly coming to life. But there was nothing. The hallway outside my door was silent, empty, too empty. I opened the door cautiously, stepping into the dim light. The carpet smelled damp, faintly of mold and something else I couldn't place. Each step made a soft thump that echoed down the corridor. I told myself it was just the building settling, but the sound didn't echo like it should. It stretched, like the walls were swallowing it. The receptionist was gone. That wasn't unusual. Maybe he had gone on a break. But the office itself looked strange. Papers were stacked neatly, more neatly than I remembered. And the light, the one that flickered yesterday, was now steady. Too steady. It didn't feel like the same room. I shook it off. I was being paranoid. I wandered down the hall. The walls were lined with doors, all closed, all unmarked, except for the numbers. Room 7, room 12 mine, room 9. Oddly, the numbers didn't feel sequential. Or maybe they did, but my mind twisted them. I couldn't tell anymore, then I heard it. A faint thump followed by a soft scrape. It came from somewhere further down, maybe 2 doors away. I froze, my heart started to pound. I told myself it was just another guest, maybe moving luggage, but there was no car outside. No one else had checked in. The sound stopped. I waited, straining my ears. Nothing. I started to move forward again, slow, careful, each step deliberate. Another thump, closer this time. But the hallway was empty. I turned my head, trying to see down every corridor, every corner. Nothing. The fluorescent lights flickered again. Shadows danced across the walls, long and thin. I felt like the hallway was watching me, like it had stretched itself in the night just to see what I would do. I tried to keep my voice steady. "Hello?" I said softly. The sound swallowed itself, disappearing into the walls. I checked the doors. Locked. Some didn't even seem to have handles, just blank panels painted over. I don't know why I expected anything else. But when I tried my own room door, I noticed the lock seemed different, tighter. The key slid in, but it felt like it resisted, like the door didn't want me inside. Inside, everything was normal. Too normal. I looked around, half expecting something to have changed overnight. Nothing had. But the air felt heavier, thick, almost sticky, as if the room had absorbed some part of the hallway's unease. I went back to the hallway. I wanted coffee, water, something, the lobby, the office. But as I stepped out again, I noticed something strange. Footprints. Faint, wet footprints in the carpet, leading from my door down the hall. But no one had been there. I couldn't see the prints leading to the lobby either. Just stopping in mid-hallway. A shiver ran down my spine. I told myself it was rain dripping in from somewhere, or maybe leftover water from the night before. But the prints were clear, distinct. They stopped abruptly, right before the next door. I backed up slowly. The silence was suffocating. I tried to breathe normally, but every inhale felt loud, jagged. My ears were ringing now, like the hallway itself was humming at a frequency I couldn't understand. I made my way to the office. The door opened easily this time, no one inside, but the papers, they were shuffled, not like yesterday. Someone, or something, had been there. A note left on the desk, just one line. "You shouldn't have come alone." I stared at it, heart hammering. The handwriting was jagged, uneven, like it had been scratched quickly, but the ink was dry, old, like it had been sitting there for years, waiting for me. I dropped the note. It made no sound. The carpet seemed to swallow it. I looked around. The office felt smaller, the walls closer. The light flickered again, but this time the shadows didn't just dance. They stretched toward me, thin, reaching. I could almost hear a whisper, like something brushing along the edge of my mind. I fled back to my room, slamming the door behind me. The lock clicked solid, reassuring, but the fear didn't leave. I pressed my back to the door and tried to calm myself. I told myself it was just a motel, empty, run down, haunted maybe by imagination. But the hallway knew I was afraid. Hours passed, though I couldn't tell how long. Every now and then I heard it, a soft thump, scrape, whisper. Sometimes it came from outside my door, sometimes from the ceiling. I didn't dare look. I couldn't. I tried to distract myself. Phone, no signal. TV, static. Even the clock seemed wrong. The hands moved, but the rhythm was off, too fast, too slow. I couldn't tell if it was morning or night anymore. Eventually, I forced myself to peek into the hallway. Nothing. Just the pale carpet, the doors, the faint flicker of lights. But then I saw it. In the mirror by the stairwell, my reflection. It wasn't right. My head tilted at an impossible angle. My eyes too wide, pupils too dark. I jerked back. The reflection normalized, but the feeling stayed. That hallway, that motel, it had watched me, and it remembered. I tried to sleep again. I lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling, but every sound in the walls, every creak, drip, and whisper felt amplified. I started counting the floorboards beneath me, trying to convince myself it was just an old building. But then I realized I could hear the floorboards above me. Someone, or something, was walking up there. Slow, deliberate steps. Stop. Pause. Step. Pause. I wanted to call someone, tell them what was happening. But the phone had no signal. No calls, no messages, nothing. I was cut off. Alone. By the time the night, or what I thought was night, set in, I stopped moving. I sat on the edge of the bed listening. The hallway outside my door groaned, stretched, whispered. I could almost make out voices, low, guttural, indistinct, not quite human. I didn't move. I didn't breathe loudly. I didn't blink. I just sat there, pretending I wasn't there, hoping whatever was in the hallway would ignore me. And for a while it did. The footsteps receded, the whispers stopped, the hallway settled into silence again. But I knew it wasn't gone. I could feel it, waiting, watching, patient. And when the silence returned, it wasn't comforting. It was just more aware of me than ever before. I realized then that I had made a mistake coming here, not just because of the storm, or the abandoned feel of the place, or the empty office, but because this motel, it wasn't just empty, it was alive, in its own way. It watched, it remembered, and I somehow had stepped right into its gaze. I didn't sleep that night. Or maybe I did briefly in snatches between the creaks and whispers and thumps. When morning came, though I wasn't sure it really did, I still felt the hallway, outside my door, stretching just beyond the light, waiting for me to step out again. I didn't know how long I could stay. The fear was starting to feel like a weight pressing on my chest. Not the fear of the storm or the darkness, but the fear of being watched, of being remembered, of the motel learning who I was. And I realized then that whatever had written that note, whatever had moved in the night, wasn't going to stop. Not until it had my full attention. Not until it had me completely. I should have left that morning. I should have just grabbed my bag, slipped out the door, and driven straight into the gray, wet world outside. But I didn't. I couldn't. Some part of me was drawn back to that hallway, to the quiet pulse of the motel, as if it had something it needed to show me. It started with room 7. I don't know why I went there. Curiosity, maybe. Or desperation. I walked down the hall. The carpet damp under my shoes, the fluorescent lights flickering unevenly. The hallway seemed longer than I remembered. Every step echoed differently, stretched, warped. I counted doors as I passed. 6, 7, room 7. The door looked ordinary, too ordinary, but the air around it, it pressed on me, heavy, thick, like I had walked underwater. The key slid into the lock easily, smoother than mine had, and the door swung open with a creak that didn't sound like a door, more like a sigh. Inside, the room was alive. That was the only word I could use. The walls pulsed slightly, faintly, like the room was breathing. The bedspread had tiny wrinkles that seemed to shift when I looked away. The mirror above the dresser caught my reflection, but I couldn't trust it. My face looked pale, yes, but my eyes, they were darker than they should be, wider, watching. I stepped closer to the mirror. My reflection moved, but not exactly as I did. A fraction of a second delayed. My head tilted. My reflection smiled. I didn't. I tried to shake it off. The room was old. Mirrors are strange. Eyes play tricks. I closed the door behind me, but it didn't feel like I had locked it. The knob seemed to resist, like it didn't want me to leave. Then I saw the writing. On the wall across from the bed, faint at first, almost invisible in the dim light. "Do you see me?" I froze. The words were written in some dark, sticky substance I couldn't identify. The letters seemed to shift slightly, curling and straightening as if the wall itself was breathing them. My hand hovered in front of the wall, but I didn't touch it. I was too afraid. The mirror. Another message. Not yet. My reflection didn't blink. I backed away. The floor creaked beneath me, but the sound came from the ceiling, too. Upstairs, I thought. Or was it below? I couldn't tell anymore. The room distorted space, stretched it. I felt like I was standing in a fish tank, water pressing in from all sides. I wanted to run. I wanted to leave. But the door, it wasn't cooperating. I tried to turn the knob. Nothing. Tried to pull it. Nothing. It was as if the room didn't want me to leave. And then the whispers started. Low, soft, almost imperceptible. Words I couldn't understand. Not human, not fully. Just fragments. Here, stay, see. I pressed my hands over my ears. The sound didn't stop. It reverberated inside my skull. The walls seemed closer now. The bedspread moved again, as if something underneath it was breathing. My heart was pounding, wild, frantic. I backed into the corner, trying to make myself small, trying to make the room ignore me. But that didn't work. The room wanted attention. The writing shifted again. Look closer. I couldn't stop myself. I had to see. I stepped toward the mirror. My reflection didn't move at first. Then, slowly, it lifted a hand I hadn't moved, pointing at something behind me. I whipped around. Nothing. But the air, it vibrated. Heavy. Alive. I turned back to the mirror. My reflection grinned. I did not. I stumbled toward the bed, trying to distract myself, and then noticed the desk. My bag. I hadn't unpacked it here, of course, but my things, my notebook, my pen, were on the desk. Not mine. Or maybe mine, but wrong. The handwriting inside the notebook had changed. Messages scrawled over my own words. You shouldn't have come, but now you are here. I dropped the notebook. It made no sound. Carpet swallowed it. The lights flickered. Shadows on the walls deepened, stretching thin, reaching. I could hear scraping now, soft along the walls. Fingernails, maybe, or claws. The room smelled of wet wood, mold, and something metallic. Blood! I didn't want to know. I ran my hands over the walls. The paint felt wrong, alive, pulsing under my fingertips. I tried to leave again. The knob, still nothing. Panic settled in my chest, hot and heavy. I started yelling, "Hello? Someone help me!" My voice bounced back at me, distorted. The room didn't reply. But the writing on the wall changed again. No one can help you. I ran to the bed. Under the mattress, I thought maybe I could hide. Maybe the room would lose interest. But as I lifted it, I realized the bed had grown. Wider. Taller. The mattress pressed against my chest as if trying to trap me. My arms burned, shaking. The mirror. I couldn't look at it. But I had to. It called me. Pulling, whispering. My reflection moved again, closer this time, stepping out of the glass. No, that wasn't possible. I blinked. It was still in the mirror, but I felt it, behind me. Watching, waiting. I didn't know how long I stayed like that. Minutes? Hours? Time didn't exist here. The room shifted constantly. Shadows stretched across the walls like fingers. Every surface pulsed. Every reflection, mirror, TV screen, even the window was wrong. And then the messages appeared everywhere. On the walls, the mirrors, the glass of the window. You are mine. You see me. I see you. I covered my eyes, rocking back and forth. Tried to make it stop. Tried to scream, but no sound came. The room wasn't just alive, it was sentient. Watching, testing, waiting. I thought about the hallway outside. The whispers there. The footsteps. The note in the office. All pieces of the same thing. It was building, shaping, learning. And I was the new subject. I finally collapsed on the bed, unable to run, unable to fight. My body shook. The air hummed. The room seemed satisfied just for a moment. Quiet. Too quiet. I opened my eyes. The mirror. My reflection. Smiling. Not me, but a version of me that belonged here. To the room. To the motel. I didn't recognize the face completely. The eyes were too dark, the skin too pale, and then I noticed something else. On the wall, a new message. You will not leave. I clawed at the door again. Nothing. I screamed. Nothing. The room pulsed. Flexing. Alive. Waiting for me to understand. Hours or maybe days passed. I don't know. Sleep came in short, fragmented bursts. In every dream, the room followed me. Every corner, every mirror, every shadow had a voice. My own voice, my own thoughts, twisted, reflected back at me in ways I couldn't control. By the time I finally stopped thrashing, I realized the truth. Room 7 wasn't just a room. It was a trap, a living thing. It remembered everyone who entered. It recorded. It watched. And now it was feeding off me. Learning me. Becoming me. Or maybe I was becoming it. I didn't know how I would leave. I didn't know if leaving was even possible. Every time I tried, the room resisted. Every reflection reminded me I was alone. Every shadow whispered that this was just the beginning. And through it all, the room watched. Patient. Hungry. Immortal. I couldn't stay here, and yet I couldn't leave. I've been doing this job long enough that most of the calls blur together. Car accidents, break-ins, kids calling 911 because they locked themselves out. The usual chaos. But tonight was different. I can still hear his voice, like it's lingering behind my eyes, and I can't shake it. It started at 2:43 a.m. My screen blinked, and the line popped up. Distress call 327, Motel. The name of the motel wasn't familiar, just one of those chains that dot the outskirts of town. The kind with flickering neon signs and the faint smell of bleach. I hit the line, my fingers hovering over the headset as I waited for him to speak. "Wevin, what's your emergency?" My voice sounded sterile, practiced. I've said that 1,000 times, but tonight I felt it differently, like the words were too sharp, cutting through the quiet in the room. There was a pause. Then, "Help, please, His voice cracked, panicked, trembling. "Okay, slow down," I said, leaning forward. "You're at what's the motel name?" He swallowed hard, and I imagined him doing it, the dry click of a throat in the dark. The Pinewood, room 24, I typed furiously, the numbers echoing in my head. 24, Pinewood. The address auto-filled on my screen, and I traced it with my eyes. There wasn't anything unusual yet. Just another man in trouble, I told myself. Just another call. But his voice had a something. An edge that made the hairs on my neck stand up. "Sir, what's going on in your room?" I asked, keeping my voice low, calm. I don't know. "I can't. Things are moving," he said. His words stumbled out like he was trying to explain something impossible. "I heard noises. I think someone's in here." I paused. My hand hovered over the keyboard. Most people exaggerate when they're scared. Hallucinations, creaking pipes, wind through the blinds. "Okay," I said carefully. "Stay calm." "Are you hurt?" "No, I don't think so." I could hear his breath now, rapid, shallow. Something in it made me focus too hard. Like if I listened closely enough, I could hear the panic pressing against his ribs. "All right," I said. "Can you tell me if the door is locked?" I think so." I checked. "I swear I did." "But," his voice dropped. "But the door, it's moving." I don't know why." I blinked at the screen. The words didn't make sense. Doors don't move by themselves. But his panic was real, palpable. I typed, "Caller distressed, room 24, Pinewood Motel," and hit the emergency dispatch button for local police. "Help is on the way," I said, trying to anchor him. "They'll be there soon. I don't understand. I'm alone here. I locked the door. But it's like..." He stopped, choked on his own fear. "It's like it's listening." I swallowed. The word made my chest tighten. "Listening?" "Yes, I can feel it, watching. I don't know how else to explain." I wanted to ask him if he was alone, if there was anyone else in the room. But the question felt ridiculous, almost cruel. I could hear the shuffling now, soft, deliberate, like feet brushing across carpet, though I couldn't tell if it was coming from him or somewhere else. "Sir, stay on the line," I said firmly. "Just keep talking to me." "Can you sit down?" I don't want to. I feel trapped." His words trembled. "Trapped in here? Like I can't leave." "The walls, they're closing." I tried to picture the room. A standard motel room, bed, nightstand, a cheap lamp. Maybe the air conditioner rattling. Maybe nothing at all. But his panic made it feel wrong, like I was peeking into a scene I wasn't meant to see. Focus on me, I said, even as a cold shiver ran down my spine. Take a deep breath. Count with me. 1, 2, 3. He didn't. He was too far gone, swallowed by the fear curling around his throat. And then he laughed. A short, jagged laugh that didn't reach his voice, like a thing inside him had made it. It's here. It's right here. My hand froze over the keyboard. Sir, I can see it, he shouted. I can see it behind the bed. It's... And then silence. Just the click of the line, the faint hum of the monitors. Hello? I whispered, leaning closer. Sir, are you there? Static. Soft, like white noise washing over his last words, twisting them into something unrecognizable. My fingers hovered over the buttons. Should I call back? But if something had happened, I shook the thought away. No. Standard procedure. Police were en route. I typed a note in his file. Caller distressed. Visual hallucinations. Room 24. Immediate response requested. And then he spoke again, low, trembling. Don't look at it, I frowned. My heart kicked a little faster. What? Just don't. You'll see it too if you look. His voice cracked, small like a child pleading in the dark. It's in the corner. Watching, waiting. I leaned back in my chair. My office felt colder. The hum of the computers was louder, sharper. I could almost see the motel room, the bed, the corner. The fear radiating from him pressed against my chest like a physical weight. Sir, I said carefully, keeping my voice steady, you're safe on the line. No one can get to you. Help is coming. I can't. He stopped mid-sentence. The line wavered, stuttered, hissed. And then he whispered so low I almost didn't catch it. It knows my name. I typed furiously. What does it know? Shh. He hissed. Shh. It. The line went dead. I sat there, headset on my shoulder, staring at the screen. The blinking cursor mocked me, a heartbeat in the emptiness of the room. I didn't move for a long time. I could still hear his words lingering like smoke. It knows my name. Minutes passed. Police would arrive. They always do, but the echo of his fear didn't leave me. Something about the way he said it, the way his voice trembled, made it feel wrong. Not like a standard call. Not like panic born of reality. Something else had been in that room. Watching. Waiting. I kept the line open for another half hour. Nothing. Not a sound. Only the soft hum of the office, the faint beeping of the computers, and the lingering thought that maybe, just maybe, I had heard something I wasn't meant to hear. Later, when I closed his file, I noticed the timestamp again. 2:43 a.m., the exact moment the call had come in. I stared at it, a shiver crawling up my spine. I had a sinking feeling that whatever he had seen, whatever had terrorized him, it was still there, somewhere, waiting. And I realized I wasn't sure if it had ever left. I hadn't slept since the call. Not really. Every time I closed my eyes, I could hear him again, his voice tight with panic, the trembling in his throat, the faint whisper that wasn't his. It knows my name. The next call was routine, someone reporting a car accident. But my mind kept drifting back to room 24 at the Pinewood Motel. I couldn't shake it. There was something about the way he spoke, the way his fear clung to him like a second skin, something that didn't belong in the world we understand. Then the line rang again. A local alarm this time. But my instincts. They always listen first, think later. Something inside me told me to pick it up, to check if the Pinewood call had continued, I answered, half expecting silence, half expecting him again. Weapon, what's your emergency? Static, thick, heavy, like someone pressed a microphone against sandpaper. I rubbed my temple, leaning closer. Sir, are you there? A voice came through, but it wasn't clear. Not completely. A low, broken whisper, tugging at the edges of my consciousness. He's here. My fingers froze. I could feel my pulse in my ears. Who's here? What do you mean? More static, but behind it, a sound. Something faint but deliberate. Soft scuffing, almost like footsteps. A chair dragged across the floor. A door creaked. I swallowed hard. Sir, are you alone in the room? Yes, the word trembled. I think so. But, he paused. I could hear him breathing. But there was another sound now. Soft. Patient. Just beyond comprehension. I strained, tilting my head like I could see the room through the headset. What is it? Tell me exactly what you're hearing. He hesitated. It's moving. I don't know how. I can hear it behind me. Breathing soft, dragging something. I leaned forward. My chair creaked under me. The office felt smaller, darker. Even the fluorescent lights above seemed dull, like they were dimming around me. Sir, you need to stay on the line. Do not turn around. Do not move too quickly. Help is on the way. I don't think I can stay calm. I can feel it near me, close, watching. There it was again. The sound behind him. My stomach twisted. A low scrape along the floor. Something shifting just out of view. I told myself it was an animal, a rat maybe. But I knew rats don't make footsteps like that. Slow, deliberate enough to mock your heartbeat. Sir, listen to me, I said. My own voice sounding strange to my ears, distant and hollow. Focus on me. Describe the room. It's the same. Bed, lamp, nightstand. The TV's off. But, he choked on a breath. But the shadows, they move, they stretch. I can see them crawling along the walls. I felt it too. Or at least I wanted to. I wanted to convince myself it wasn't real. But the way he described it, I could almost see the darkness shift, like smoke curling into impossible shapes, folding over itself. Can you move to the door? Try to stay near the entrance? I suggested, trying to give him a point of control. I don't think I should. I think it'll... A crash. Something fell, hard. The sound echoed through the line. I flinched. He gasped. I told you not to look. His voice broke into a scream, but it was muffled, swallowed by static. The line crackled. His words came in bursts, disjointed. It's right behind door window. Then a pause. Almost like he'd been pulled underwater. Sir? I whispered. My fingers shook, hovering over the emergency alert button. A whisper, soft and deliberate, almost teasing. You're next. I froze, not a human voice, not even a part of him. Something layered, distorted, impossible to pinpoint. My stomach dropped, a cold weight pressing against my ribs. I pressed my hand to the headset. Who's there? Silence, then a scuff, a shuffle, and then a low guttural sound, not quite a growl, not quite a hum. I didn't know what it was, but I knew it didn't belong in the motel in our world. I can't. It's close, he whispered, voice breaking. I think it can see me. Hear me. It knows. The static thickened, wrapping around the words, stretching them, twisting them. I could barely make out his voice now, fragmented and distant. Help. 911, no. And then it came. The repetition. Faint at first, like echoes, and his name. His name. His name. I jerked back in my chair. The voice. It was repeating him. My blood ran cold. It wasn't human. I could tell. There was an intelligence behind it, a patience, a malice. Stay on the line, I shouted. Do not move. Just stay calm. You are not alone, I'm here. But the sound of it, the presence he felt, it wrapped around him, around the room, around the line itself. It wasn't just in the motel. It was here in my office too, seeping through the headset, pressing against my eardrums, filling the space between thought and panic. He screamed again, high-pitched, terrified. And then a low chuckle. It wasn't him. I could tell. The laugh was wet, hungry, stretching longer than a human throat could manage. I fumbled for the panic button, but my hands were shaking. I wanted to close my eyes, to block the sound, to will it away. But I couldn't. I was trapped, a witness to something that defied reason. Sir, listen to me. Tell me what it looks like. I can't. His voice broke into static. And then, it's me. Behind me, but not me. The line went silent. Only static. Thick. Alive. Pressing. I held the headset against my ear, willing the sound to end, willing it to stop. But it didn't. It lingered, soft and waiting, like a shadow that refuses to leave. I tried to call him back. Nothing. I tried again. And again. Each time the line answered with static, a whisper at the edge of comprehension. You can see me. I'm here. I leaned back, trembling. The office lights flickered. The hum of the computers rose and fell like a pulse, and I realized something I didn't want to admit. It wasn't just in his room. The line itself had carried it. The sound, the presence. It was in the wires, in the circuits, in the tiny hum of electricity, watching, listening, waiting. I took a deep breath. Tried to remind myself, logical, rational, something explainable. Maybe a prank, maybe interference. But deep down I knew. I knew that the motel room, the man, the thing that called itself him, or wasn't him, was out there, somewhere, and it wasn't finished. And I wasn't finished, either. I can't tell you how long I sat there after the call ended. Minutes, hours. Time had lost its meaning. Every sound in my office made me jump. The hum of the fluorescent lights, the tap of a keyboard in another room, even the faint rattle of my own breath. And still, I kept thinking about him. Room 24, Pinewood Motel. The thing that had been there with him. Then the phone rang again. I didn't even look at the display. I knew. I just knew, I answered, voice tight. "No one, are you there?" Static, thick, almost tangible. And then, faintly, his voice. Low, trembling. "Please, help me." "Sir, it's me. Stay calm." "Are you alone?" I asked, forcing my voice steady. "Yes, The line crackled violently. "I'm not alone." "I don't—" The words stuttered, broken, disappearing into a fog of static. And then something new. A whisper, not his, soft and deliberate. "His name—" I froze, not just a repeat. It was patient, deliberate, crawling across the line like a shadow. "Sir, tell me where you are," I shouted, leaning over the console. I can't—" His voice trembled, each syllable dragged through fear. "It's—" Behind me, watching, waiting. The line hissed, intermittent, fragmented. And every time he tried to speak, it was like the static consumed him. I could hear him gasp, scream, whisper, and then a strange guttural sound. Not a human voice, something else. A vibration in my skull, like it had entered the wires and was speaking directly to my mind. I pressed the emergency button again. "Help is on the way." "Stay calm! Do not move!" "I can't—" His voice broke into a scream, but it vanished into static. Then, clear for a moment, "Why is it calling my name?" I stopped typing. My heart hammered. The words echoed in my head. "Calling my name." It wasn't just him. It wasn't even just the motel. It had learned his name. Spoken it, twisted it, repeated it, faint at first, then louder, then everywhere. I tried to focus, tried to remind myself it was a human making the sound, some elaborate prank. But I knew deep down it wasn't human. Something that shouldn't exist had crossed the line, and it had learned him. Learned me, too. I could feel its patience, its hunger, pressing through the headset. Then he screamed again, a high, strangled sound that made my stomach lurch. Behind, it's watching. "Don't—" And then silence. Only static. Only the low, soft hum that seemed to thrum against my skull. I leaned back, my hand pressed to my forehead, trying to breathe through it. Trying to rationalize it, I called back. The line answered. Static. A whisper. Not his name. His name— I couldn't take it anymore. I had to hear him. I had to know if he was alive, if he was— something. "Sir, can you hear me? Speak to me." A faint sound. Footsteps. Soft. Almost cautious. Not human. My stomach dropped. I imagined him in the room, heart pounding, every shadow alive. A chair scraped across the floor. Something breathed too close to him. The line vibrated, hummed with the presence. I see it." His words trembled through static. "It standing—" "In the corner. Behind the door." "Not me." I gripped the console, trying to ground myself. "Not me, not him." Something else. Something patient. Something waiting. "I'm coming," I shouted, knowing it was meaningless. I was not there. I was thousands of miles away, tethered only by a fragile wire and a voice breaking under terror. And then he began repeating something, faint, almost involuntary. "Don't look, don't look, don't." The line crackled violently. His words fragmented into whispers, static, and then his name. His name, I pressed my hand to my mouth. My pulse raced. It wasn't him saying it. Not really. It was it. The thing in the room, mimicking him, twisting his voice, waiting for me to notice, to listen, to understand. Then a loud crash. Something hit the floor, heavy, deliberate. I imagined him crumpled on the carpet, trembling, unable to move. My hands shook. My chair creaked. I couldn't breathe. Sir, are you hurt? Are you okay? Stay calm, I shouted. Don't. Turn around. It's... The words dissolved into static. And then, faintly, unmistakably, I'm here. Not human, not his voice. And yet, it carried him, carried the terror, carried something waiting, something patient. I leaned back, my headset slipping from my sweaty hair, and realized I couldn't tell where the sound ended and the room began. I grabbed the emergency line again. Police are on the way. Stay where you are. Don't move. And he answered. Not clearly, not fully, but enough. I can hear, whispering, my name, over and over. Not his name. His name. The words looped in my mind. I could feel them crawling under my skin. I could hear them even after I tried to speak over them. And every time I tried to focus on his voice, the static and the whispers pulled me deeper, closer, until I felt I was in that room too, trapped, listening, waiting. I tried to call him again, and again, intermittent, fading. His voice came and went, broken into pieces. Help! Don't! See! I realized I was repeating the same motions, picking up the phone, calling, listening, trying to save him. But the thing had already crossed the line. It wasn't contained to his room. It was learning, waiting, watching, and then the whisper changed. Not his name, not human, something older, patient. And it said clearly, "You're next." I fell back in my chair. My headset slipped to the floor. I could still hear it. Faint at first, then louder, almost in my own skull. His name. You next. I couldn't think. Couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. I could feel it pressing against me. Patient. Intelligent. Mocking. And in that moment, I realized the thing wasn't just in the motel. It was in the line, in the wires, in the static. In me. Waiting. I gripped the edge of the console. I whispered to myself, to anyone, "It's not real. It's not real. It's not," but it was. And it knew my name. By the time the police arrived at the Pinewood Motel, the sun hadn't risen, but the first pale hints of dawn were creeping across the horizon. The motel's neon sign flickered, buzzing intermittently, casting long, uneven shadows across the cracked asphalt. I drove behind the squad cars in silence, my hands tight around the steering wheel. My stomach was twisted in knots. I had to see it. I had to know what was happening in room 24. When we reached the door, Officer Myers knocked, loud, firm. "Room 24, police!" No answer. We tried the handle. Locked. We tried again. Nothing. I noticed a faint shiver of movement under the crack at the bottom of the door, like the light inside was struggling to escape. I could almost see him crouch there, trembling, whispering into the static, waiting for help that would never arrive. "Open it," Myers said. He took his keys, rattled them in the lock. Nothing. I felt my throat tighten. The memory of the call, the trembling voice, the whispers, the thing in the room pressed against me. Finally, he forced the door open. The room was empty. Completely. The bed was made. The sheets tucked neatly. The nightstand lamp flickered softly, casting long, thin shadows that stretched across the beige carpet. No man, no sign of struggle. No chair overturned. Only a faint chill that made the hair on my arms stand on end. "Where is he?" I whispered, stepping forward. Myers shook his head. "No one here." "Room's empty." I moved to the bed, fingers grazing the sheets, half expecting the warmth of a body, half expecting, I didn't even know what. But the mattress was cold, untouched. I could feel the echoes of the panic, the terror, the soft whispers in the air. The officer's flashlight cut through the room, landing on the corners. Dust motes floated in the narrow beam, catching the light and drifting lazily, indifferent. But something about the shadows made me hold my breath. They didn't move like normal shadows. They stretched, twisted. They waited. I walked to the far corner. Nothing. And yet, I could feel it there. Not in sight, not in sound, but pressing against my chest, heavy and patient. Myers tapped my shoulder. "Look at this." The flickering lamp above the dresser caught my attention. Its glow shifted unnaturally, like it wasn't just flickering, it was pulsing, breathing. I noticed the corner of the room. The shadows pooled there, darker than the rest, like a stain that refused to be washed away. I wanted to leave. I wanted to run. But my feet were rooted, my eyes glued to the corner. I could feel the memory of his voice there. The whispers. His name. It knows. It knows. I swallowed hard. The officers searched the rest of the motel. Rooms were empty. Hallways silent, nothing. No one had checked in. No one had been there recently. The logs didn't show a room 24 occupant. Nothing. I stood in the room, heart hammering, listening. The flicker of the lamp seemed to pulse in time with my heartbeat. I could almost hear the soft scuff of movement in the corner. The faint dragging sound from before, though the room was empty. "Dispatcher?" Myers' voice called from the doorway. I jumped, realizing I had been staring too long, listening too closely. "Everything okay?" I forced a laugh, shaking my head. Yeah. I'm fine, just tired, I guess. But I wasn't fine. I could still hear it. The whispers. The faint hiss of something waiting just out of sight. His name. Waiting. Watching. I moved to the window. The motel lot was empty. Only the early morning fog, curling in thin fingers across the asphalt, and the flicker of the neon sign. I tried to convince myself I had imagined it all. The call, the panic, the presence. But the memory was too vivid, too tactile. I could feel it in my chest, in my temples, in the slight quiver of my hands. We checked the closets. The bathroom. Even under the bed, nothing. Not a trace of him. Not a trace of struggle. Just the faint hum of the flickering lamp and the oppressive sense of watching. Myers finally turned to me. "You sure you didn't get a prank call?" I wanted to laugh. I wanted to nod. But I knew better. This wasn't a prank. I could feel it too clearly. Not human. Patient. Waiting. I nodded faintly, swallowing the lump in my throat. Yeah, probably just a mistake. But as we walked out of the room, the lamp flickered one last time. And in that brief moment of darkness, I swear I saw movement in the corner. Something small, crouched, patient, waiting. Not fully there, but almost. And then it was gone. Back in my car, I tried to shake it off. Tried to rationalize it. Tried to tell myself the fear had been mine. The hallucination mine alone. But every time I closed my eyes, I could see him. His voice. The static. The whispers. The soft dragging of something across the floor, just behind him, and that corner of the room, dark and patient, waiting for something. Waiting for him. Waiting for me. The officers left soon after. No report could explain it. No evidence, no man, no victim, nothing. Room 24 was empty, and yet I could still feel it. And later, when I returned to the office, I sat in the chair, hands trembling over the console, staring at the headset. The memory of the call, the static, the whispers, all of it pressed against me, waiting, patient, intelligent. And I realized that just because the room was empty didn't mean it was gone. It had learned, it had waited, and it would wait again. I thought it had ended. I thought room 24, the Pinewood Motel, the panic, and the whispers were behind me. I was wrong. It started the next night. I was alone in the dispatch office, the glow of the monitors washing over my desk in pale rectangles. My headset lay beside me, a lifeline I now feared. The phone rang, sharp, insistent. I froze. My heart hammered. Every instinct screamed to leave it alone. But I answered anyway. "Wevan," I said, voice tight. "Are you there?" Static. Thick and oppressive. And then faintly, unmistakably, a voice. Trembling, panicked. "Help, please. My stomach dropped. I could hear it clearly now. Every tremor in his voice, every hitch of his breath. The man from room 24. Or someone or something speaking through him. I held the headset closer. "Sir, where are you?" The Pinewood room 24, he stammered. Every word the same as before, as if recorded, repeated. My fingers shook over the console. I glanced at the clock. Yesterday. Last week. No. It didn't make sense. The time was now. But the call, it was identical. Word for word, pause for pause, trembling for trembling. Sir, stay calm. Help is on the way, I said, forcing my voice steady, though my throat was tight with fear. I don't understand. I'm alone here. I locked the door, but his voice broke. It's like it's listening. I leaned back, sweat prickling at my hairline. I could almost feel the presence through the line, the same patient, pressing intelligence I had felt before. My hands shook as I typed frantic notes, trying to track it, to rationalize it. But my rational mind fled, leaving only dread. Sir, stay on the line. Can you check the door? I asked. I think so. I checked. I swear I did, but he swallowed hard. It's moving. I don't know why. I could hear it again, soft, deliberate. Something scuffing across the floor behind him, brushing against the carpet, slow and patient. And the whispers, faint, almost teasing. His name. His name? My hands shook on the console. I tried to tell myself it was déjà vu, a memory, a glitch, a prank. But I knew better. I could feel it in the static. Patient, watching, waiting. And it had learned the sound of his panic, the tremor in his words. Even the way I spoke, I can feel it near me, he whispered. Close, watching. I gritted my teeth. Do not move, stay calm. Focus on me. I can't. His voice trembled. It's right behind me. A loud crash. Something fell. I winced. I could hear him gasp. The static hummed, thick and alive, as if the line itself were breathing. I pressed my hand over my mouth. Don't look at it. His whisper came faintly through the interference. You'll see it too if you look. I felt the memory of the corner in room 24, the shadows stretching, twisting, waiting, the lamp flickering in unnatural pulses, the chill that pressed against my chest like the thing itself was inside me now. I'm coming! Stay calm! Stay where you are! I shouted, but the line broke, static. And then, unmistakably, the whisper repeated. His name. His name? His name? I pressed the headset closer. The words wrapped around my skull, crawling through my thoughts. Not human, not him. Something else. Intelligent. Patient. Waiting. And it was here. In my office, through the wires, in the same pulse of static I had tried to ignore. I realized something that made my stomach turn. This wasn't just a call. It never had been. The thing wasn't in the motel. It had moved. It had found a way to reach me, to repeat, to teach me the pattern, to trap me, the voice continued, identical in every way, every crack of panic, every pause. I can see it behind the bed. It's, and then silence, only static. The same pause I had heard before, but this time I knew it wasn't empty. It was waiting, listening, patient. And I realized I couldn't hang up. If I did, it would be worse. I didn't know how, but I knew. I typed notes frantically. Distress call 327, replayed. Room 24, identical. Presence, auditory, patient, unknown entity. Words blurred as my fingers shook. The monitors flickered. My office felt smaller, darker. The static pressed against me like a living thing. It's here, watching. I can feel it. His voice trembled. Behind me. Not me! The line crackled violently. His voice fragmented, broken into pieces of fear echoing across the static. And I heard it again. Not human, not him. The voice repeating, teaching, taunting. His name. His name. His name. I pressed my hand to the headset, trying to block it out. Tried to convince myself it was a recording, a trick of the wires. But I knew. I felt it crawling through the circuits, pressing into the back of my mind. Patient, watching, waiting. I realized then that the call was a loop. Not just a replay, not just a memory. It was a cycle. Endless. Eternal. And I was trapped at the center of it. Tethered to the line, tethered to the voice, tethered to room 24. You're next. The whisper slithered through the static. I could feel my heartbeat hammering in my ears. My hands shook. My vision blurred. The monitors flickered, pulsing in sync with the lamp I had seen in the room, the one in the corner that didn't exist anymore but still did in my memory. I wanted to hang up, I wanted to run, but I knew it would follow me. The loop wouldn't end. The static wouldn't stop. The whispers would never cease. And deep down, I knew. One day it would call me by name, too. Patient. Waiting. The line went silent. Just static. But the whisper lingered in my skull. His name. His name. And I realized with a terror that sank into my bones that the call would come again. Identical. Word for word. Tremor for tremor. Waiting. Always waiting. And I would answer it. Because it knew my name. And I knew somehow that there was no escape. It was just past midnight when I started my rounds. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, flickering every now and then, and the air smelled faintly of bleach and old carpet. I had worked at the Eastwood Motel long enough to know the rhythm of it. The quiet between the cars outside. The occasional tap of heels in the lobby, the sigh of the air conditioner struggling against the desert heat. Most nights it was ordinary, predictable, safe. But tonight? Tonight was different. The first room on my list was 212. I unlocked the door and stepped inside, pushing the cart a little too hard, making the wheels squeal. The bed was half made, sheets wrinkled like someone had slept there for hours. That wasn't unusual. Guests often left in a rush. But the bathroom? The soap had been sliced neatly in half, the toothbrushes lined up in a perfect row on the counter, and a small notebook lay open on the sink. I didn't recognize it. It wasn't anyone's room I had cleaned before. The pages were filled with dates and names, scrawled in neat handwriting. Some I recognized, last week's guests. Some I didn't. I froze. A cold prickle ran down my neck. My hand hovered over the notebook, my fingers trembling. How could this have appeared here? Nobody comes back at night. Nobody but me. I shook my head, trying to tell myself I was imagining things. Maybe the night shift janitor left it. Maybe something. I set the notebook on the bed and stepped back. The sheets rustled as if someone had just lain down. I blinked and the movement stopped. My heart thudded. I wanted to leave, but something about the room held me in place. There was a smell, faint but unmistakable. Lavender and something metallic like blood. I turned toward the closet. The door creaked open slowly, but there was nothing inside. I told myself it was the wind, even though the motel doors were all locked. I shook my head, forcing myself to keep going. Room 214, room 216, room 214 was worse. The dresser drawers were half open, clothes draped over the floor, shoes arranged neatly in a circle, as though someone had studied them before leaving them there. And on the nightstand, my name written on a scrap of paper. My full name. I stumbled back, my breath coming fast. I wanted to scream, but no sound came. It had to be a joke. A guest. Someone hiding. But no. Every lock on every door was secure. The front desk camera only showed empty hallways. I told myself to calm down. Just do your job. Just do your job. 6 was silent when I entered. Too silent. The bed was untouched, but the air was thick, heavy. I could see my reflection in the dark window glass, but something wasn't right. My reflection lingered too long, and the eyes staring back at me seemed slower, heavier, like they were studying me. I shook my head, trying to focus. I had to finish. The lobby was empty, the hum of the fluorescent lights like a chant in my ears. I moved down the hall, my keys jangling in my hand. Every room had small things out of place. A chair turned just slightly, a pillow resting diagonally, a cup on a table that I didn't remember putting there. And then there was 218. The door was closed, but a faint light flickered beneath it. Yellow and thin like a candle. I hadn't turned on the lights here tonight. Nobody should have been here. I hesitated, hand on the doorknob. My stomach churned. Hello? I whispered, no answer. Just the hum of the air conditioner. I opened the door. The room was empty. But the walls? The walls were covered in sticky notes. Hundreds of them. Each had a word, a sentence, a date, all of them describing things I had done that night, or thought I had done. She froze in 212. She saw the notebook, the eyes in the window. I dropped the keys. They clattered to the floor. My reflection in the mirror on the dresser looked wrong again. Too slow, too deliberate. I could see it moving after I had stopped, following my hands as I tried to pick up the keys. I forced myself to move. I had to clean. I had to finish. I told myself I was imagining it, that the long hours, the monotony, the endless corridors, it was playing tricks on me. Room 220. That one was quiet. Too quiet. The bed was made perfectly, corners sharp enough to cut. But the window, I froze. Someone had written on the glass. Words I couldn't read, scratched deep into the fog of condensation. I leaned closer. The letters shifted as I looked. First, they said leave, then stay, then look. My breath hitched. I stumbled back. I turned to leave, and the closet door creaked again. This time I saw it. A figure. Just a shadow, taller than any human, hunched, thin. It didn't move like a person, more like the darkness itself was bending. My mouth went dry. I wanted to run, but my legs felt glued to the carpet. It raised something. No, not raised. It didn't move in any human way. And then it vanished. Just vanished. I blinked. The room was empty. The air smelled like burnt sugar and old dust. I could hear my own heart, loud and wrong in the quiet. I backed out of the room, my hands shaking so badly I almost dropped the cart. The hallway was empty. I pressed my back to the wall and tried to breathe. I had to finish. I couldn't leave now. Not with the night still stretching ahead, the room's waiting. I moved to 222. The door was ajar. I hadn't opened it yet. I pushed it gently. The room was ordinary. Too ordinary. Sheets wrinkled, TV on mute, the faint smell of perfume. But on the dresser, a small photograph sat. I didn't recognize the people in it, but they were staring straight at me. Their eyes. They moved. Following me. I slammed the door shut, heart hammering, and leaned against it. My forehead pressed to the cool metal. I had to tell someone. I had to call. But my phone was in my locker downstairs and I couldn't move. Something was in the hallway now. I could hear it. A scraping, a soft, deliberate sound. Not footsteps. Not quite. Something gliding across the carpet. I held my breath. It stopped. Then from the corner of my eye, a chair moved. Just slightly. Just enough to make me look. And the hallway was empty again. I finished the rounds mechanically, though every fiber of my being screamed at me to leave, to run. I didn't stop to pick up the keys I had dropped. I didn't check the card. I just moved. By the time I got to the last room, I was shaking so badly I could barely fit the key in the lock. The door swung open, revealing nothing. Just the room. Just the air, thick and cold. But I could feel it. The presence, watching, waiting. I didn't linger. I shoved the door closed behind me and leaned on the wall, my breathing ragged. The night wasn't over, not by far. And I knew that the motel had changed tonight. Or maybe I had. Maybe I had always been seeing it, but now it was showing itself to me. I finished my rounds in silence, pretending I hadn't noticed the impossible things, the impossible rooms. I told myself it was all in my head, that I was tired, that tomorrow the lights would be normal, the rooms would be normal, and the air would smell only of bleach and old carpet. But deep down, I knew better. The motel was awake, and it was watching. I hated the lobby at night. It always looked smaller than it should, cramped and dark even under the buzzing fluorescent lights. The front desk smelled faintly of coffee grounds and old furniture polish, and the chairs in the waiting area were too stiff, their leather cracked like old skin. I'd cleaned this lobby hundreds of times, but tonight it felt wrong. I was wiping down the counters when I noticed it. My reflection in the glass doors looked normal at first, but then I blinked, and it lingered too long, staring. I froze, wiping hand suspended in midair. My reflection didn't move immediately when I did. It smiled faintly just for a second. I shook my head, trying to convince myself I was imagining things. The lobby mirrors were everywhere. Behind the desk, along the walls, even in the small vestibule that led to the elevators. I went to polish one near the elevator, the spray misting in the air, my rag moving in slow circles. And then I saw it, a figure standing behind me. Just a shadow, tall and thin, hands pressed together as if it were praying. I spun around. Nothing. I stared back at the mirror. The shadow was still there. I stepped forward. It wasn't following me, not exactly. It stayed in the corner of the reflection, always watching. I blinked again. Gone. My pulse slammed in my chest. I laughed nervously. Of course it was a trick of the glass, a smudge, my tired eyes playing games with me. I kept cleaning, keeping one eye on every reflective surface. But the reflections weren't just mirrors. The glass in the front doors caught the parking lot, the empty lot stretching into blackness. And in that glass I saw someone standing in the distance, a woman maybe, wearing a long coat. She was still staring. I squinted. The doors were locked. No one could be out there. When I looked directly at her in the reflection, she disappeared. Only the empty lot remained, silent under the dim light. I rubbed my eyes and tried to focus on the counters again. The lobby was quiet. Too quiet. Usually the air conditioning made a low hum. The vending machine rattled when it was too full. The phones at the desk sometimes rang. Tonight, none of that. Just silence. I glanced toward the wall mirror again. My reflection looked back. But it wasn't me. The eyes were darker, sunken, tired beyond what I felt. The mouth tilted into a slight smirk. I jerked back. The reflection blinked. I hadn't. I moved to the chairs in the waiting area, adjusting cushions, straightening magazines. I told myself to ignore the mirrors, to focus on my work. But the shadows moved differently here. Not the shadows in the room, but the ones in the glass. Sometimes I could see more than one figure fleeting behind me. Sometimes just a hand, a shoulder, a flicker of hair. Always gone when I turned to check. I tried talking to myself. You're tired. Just tired. But the words sounded hollow. My own voice bounced off the mirrors, layering with something else. A whisper? No, just the echo. But it wasn't echoing correctly. One mirror caught it a beat later. Another just a whisper. I straightened the magazines again, and my reflection in the mirror above the desk moved differently from me. It reached out its hand. I froze. I couldn't breathe. Slowly I raised mine. The hand in the reflection didn't meet mine. It lingered there, waiting, watching, judging. Then I noticed the other figures. In the corner mirror, a man leaned against the wall behind me. He had no face. Just a smooth, blank plane where his features should have been. He tilted his head as if curious. I wanted to run. I wanted to scream. My legs moved, but my body didn't. The phone rang, sharp, cutting through the thick air. I jumped, heart hammering. I picked it up. Silence, just the line. And then a voice, low, almost too soft to hear. Look. I dropped the phone. It hit the desk and rolled under the drawer. The voice came again. Look at them. See what they see? I swallowed. My eyes darted to the mirrors. The reflections were changing. Not the usual delayed movement, not the slight distortions. Whole scenes were shifting. One mirror showed the hallway outside, but twisted. The walls leaned, crooked. Doors that didn't exist swung open. Shadows moved inside, flickering like flames. I backed away, hands pressed to the counter. And that's when I realized the mirrors weren't just reflecting. They were showing the motel differently. Showing me differently. Showing something else entirely. I wanted to leave. I tried to. But the lobby doors didn't budge. The locks clicked, tight and unyielding. I was trapped in this glass cage, surrounded by surfaces that weren't reflecting reality. I moved carefully toward the elevators, hoping the basement or upper floors would be normal, untouched by these reflections. The elevator doors shined like mirrors themselves, and when I stepped close, I saw more figures. Men, women, children, all frozen in quiet poses, staring. Not moving, not breathing, just waiting. I pressed the button to the second floor. The elevator moved silently, impossibly fast. When it opened, the hall looked familiar, yet wrong. Shadows pooled in the corners. Light spilled across the floor in strange, unnatural angles. And at the end of the hallway, the mirror at the far wall reflected me or not me. A version of me that smiled even as my stomach knotted with terror. I blinked. The smile vanished. I pressed onward, checking rooms as I went. Each one was clean, orderly, exactly as it should be. But the mirrors, they were different. One showed a figure standing behind me, hunched, whispering something I couldn't hear. I turned and the room was empty. Another mirror reflected the ceiling, bending down toward me, as if the room itself were alive, pressing closer. By the time I returned to the lobby, the air felt heavier, thick like syrup. I could barely breathe. The mirrors lined the walls, countless surfaces reflecting infinite versions of me. Some looked sad. Some scared. Some grinning, smiling, eyes too wide, too dark. And in one of the larger mirrors near the front desk, I saw someone standing behind me. A woman, her face pale, her hair wet, clinging to her skin. She raised a hand, pointing toward the basement door. I blinked. Gone. The whispering started then. Not from the phone, not from the hall, but all around me, soft and low. Almost like the mirrors themselves were speaking. Come down, come down. See what hides. I shook my head, trying to shake it off. No, not real. Just tired, just tired. But the feeling of eyes crawling along my back, watching, never blinking, never leaving, it wasn't going away. I wanted to leave. I wanted to escape the lobby, the mirrors, the whispers, but the elevator refused to move when I pressed the button again. The lobby doors didn't unlock. I was trapped, surrounded by countless reflections, all slightly wrong. I leaned against the desk, heart hammering. My reflection stared back, wide-eyed, mouth slightly open, mimicking my panic, yet somehow separate from me. A figure appeared in the background of the mirror, silent, hunched. The whispering rose slightly. See, look, follow, I could feel it then. The motel wasn't just watching. It was aware of me. It was learning, feeding on my fear, shaping the reflections to draw me deeper, into the glass, into the whispers, into whatever lay beneath. I backed away from the mirrors, every step slow, careful. But the reflections moved with me, faster than I could, anticipating me. I felt a cold draft, smelled damp stone and old metal like the basement. My reflection in the nearest mirror tilted its head, smiling, and I realized it wanted me to go there. The lobby had changed. The mirrors were no longer mere surfaces. They were windows. Windows into something alive, something patient, something hungry, and they wanted me to see it. I wanted to run, but I couldn't. The mirrors held me. They whispered. They waited. And I knew deep down that if I went, I might never come back. But the pull was irresistible. The basement door loomed ahead, dark and silent. The mirrors behind me reflected only a single word, repeated over and over. Down, down, down. I swallowed hard. My hands shook. My reflection grinned, and I stepped forward. I couldn't sleep after the lobby that night. The mirrors, the whispers, the figures, they lingered behind my eyes even with the lights off. I tried telling myself it was imagination, exhaustion, the monotony of the night shift twisting reality. But the motel doesn't let you forget. It doesn't let you ignore it. By the time my next round started, the building was silent. Dead silent. Not even the hum of the air conditioner carried through the halls. I moved through the corridors with my cart, each wheel squealing faintly against the carpet. Every door I passed seemed heavier than before, thicker, like they were holding secrets inside. Room 224. I hadn't cleaned it yet. The moment I unlocked the door, a cold breath hit my face. The curtains were drawn, thick and dark. I could see shadows moving behind them, subtle at first, then faster, darting side to side. I froze. I told myself it was the wind. But the window was locked. My reflection in the glass, distorted by the low light, didn't move as I did. And then I heard it. Whispering. Not from outside, not from the hall. From the shadows themselves. Come. Come closer. I stepped back. My heart hammered against my ribs. I didn't want to look, but the shadows behind the curtains shifted, forming shapes. Human shapes. They were reaching for me, stretching, bending in impossible angles. I could hear the soft scrape of fingernails against fabric, the quiet sigh of breath I didn't recognize. I wanted to run. My legs trembled and my hands shook as I clutched the cart. But the whispers followed me, curling into my ears. Down, down, down. The words slithered through my mind like smoke. I tried to tell myself it was a trick, that I was imagining it. But the shadows began moving toward the edge of the curtain, pooling into forms I could almost see clearly. A man, tall and thin, crouched unnaturally. A woman with hair clinging to her face, whispering my name. I didn't want to listen, but I could hear it. Follow. You belong. I stumbled backward. The cart hit the wall with a dull thud, making a sound too loud in the oppressive silence. The shadows recoiled slightly, then moved again, faster this time, flitting closer, wrapping around the curtains like smoke. I grabbed the curtains, pulling them aside. The window showed only the parking lot. Empty. No figures, no movement. I exhaled shakily, trying to convince myself it was over. But the whispers didn't stop. They weren't coming from outside. They were in the room, curling around me, inside my skull, inside my chest. And then I saw it. The basement door. Down the hall. I hadn't realized it was open. A faint, flickering light spilled from beneath it. I knew, in some irrational, terrified part of me, that the shadows were leading me there. They were beckoning me, whispering, forming shapes at the edges of my vision. Human shapes, impossible angles, hands reaching. And I felt it. An overwhelming pull, like gravity, like the motel itself wanted me to go. I tried to resist. I wanted to run. My mind screamed at me to ignore it, to turn and leave. But my legs moved anyway. Slow, deliberate, almost of their own accord. The hallway stretched endlessly, the light from the basement spilling thin and uneven across the walls. The shadows followed me, drifting along the floor, brushing against my shoes, crawling up the walls. I could hear soft footsteps behind me, not mine. Something that didn't belong. I reached the basement door. The light inside was pale, sickly, and it pulsed slightly like a heartbeat. I put my hand on the handle and the whispers crescendoed. A chorus of voices all saying the same thing. Down, down, down. I swallowed, my throat dry, and opened the door. The basement smelled of damp stone and rust. My flashlight cut a narrow beam through the darkness, and for a moment I saw nothing. Then I saw them. The shadows were here too, moving across the walls, stretching like living ink. They formed shapes of people I thought I recognized. Guests from weeks ago, housekeeping staff long gone, faces twisted in silent screams. They moved without sound, bending and twisting into each other. And then I saw my own reflection in the puddles on the floor, darker, longer, wrong. It stared at me with wide eyes, mouth open, screaming silently. I stepped backward. The whispers became a hiss curling around me, filling my ears, filling my mind. You belong. You belong. You belong. I wanted to turn and run, but the basement seemed endless. The stairs I had just come down weren't there anymore, swallowed by darkness. Every corner, every wall, every shadow pulsed and shifted, guiding me deeper. I followed, though I didn't want to. The whispers beckoned, soft and insistent, carrying promises I didn't understand. Shadows clung to my legs, brushing, wrapping. I could feel them crawling up my arms, cold and wet, leaving a residue of darkness I couldn't wash off. And then I saw it. The center of the basement. A circle of shadows, taller, darker than the rest. They were waiting. Faces just beyond recognition peeked from the edges, mouths open, whispering my name. The floor beneath them seemed to pulse, breathing, alive. I realized then that I wasn't just seeing them. They were seeing me, studying me, learning me. And the whispers told me what I already knew. If I stopped, if I hesitated, if I doubted, I would never leave. I took a step forward. The shadows surged. Not violently, not like an attack, but like a tide, pulling, pressing, enveloping. My skin prickled, my hair stood on end. I could feel the darkness weaving through me, inside me, filling my chest, my lungs, my mind. And still the whispers continued, sweet and low, coaxing, guiding, promising. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run. But my legs carried me forward anyway, toward the center of the room, toward the circle of shadows. The closer I got, the more the faces in the shadows sharpened. I saw myself there, reflected in every corner, every ripple of darkness, distorted, stretched, elongated. My own fear was mirrored back at me, multiplied, amplified. I could hear my heartbeat, loud, wrong, a drum in the silence. I could feel my own breath, ragged and hot, and then colder, like something else was breathing with me. The whispers became voices I could understand. You're ours. You always were. Come closer. I stopped, barely able to move, trembling. The shadows shifted, opening a path for me. And I realized then that there was no way out. Not really. The basement, the shadows, the whispers, they were the motel now. The motel had always been this, and I had only just noticed. A figure stepped forward from the circle. Tall, thin, featureless, yet familiar. It reached out and I felt a pull I couldn't resist. My body moved, guided by something older than fear, older than the motel itself. I stepped into the circle, and everything went black. The whispers stopped. The shadows absorbed me, and the basement, the motel, returned to stillness. The corridors above were silent, lights flickering, air humming. But I was gone. No one ever found me. The motel continued its nightly rhythm, humming, breathing, waiting. Rooms remained messy in ways no guest could create. Mirrors reflected figures that vanished when looked at directly. And sometimes, the night staff swore they heard whispers guiding them somewhere they shouldn't go. I am there. Somewhere. Waiting in the shadows. A part of the motel now, just another shape behind the curtains, another whisper in the air. And when the night is quiet enough, I watch the new housekeeper. The new eyes, the new fear guiding them, slowly, inevitably, down. It was just past 10 when the phone rang. I had just dumped my suitcase onto the bed, still warm from the car's heat, and I hadn't even unpacked yet. The room smelled faintly of carpet cleaner and cheap air freshener. I picked up the receiver, expecting a call from the front desk welcoming me, telling me the Wi-Fi password, something polite, but the voice that came through wasn't polite. "Hello," it said. Quiet, soft, familiar. I froze. There was something in that voice I knew. I knew it as well as I know my own reflection. But it wasn't right. Not exactly. The tone was wrong, slower, stretching the syllables like it was savoring them. "Hello. Hi," I said, my voice tight. "Room service," the voice whispered. "For you," I blinked. "Room service?" I hadn't ordered anything. I glanced at the menu on the bedside table. Maybe they were running late, taking the liberty of bringing it anyway. "I didn't order—" "Shh," the voice interrupted. "I know." I dropped the receiver, staring at it. My hand hovered over it like touching it would make it disappear. But it didn't. My pulse was quick, uneven. My stomach turned. I tried to tell myself it was a prank call, someone with too much time, someone in on a joke. But the voice, it wasn't a stranger's voice. It was mine, or close enough to mine that my brain hurt trying to separate it. "Who is this?" I asked, my hands trembling. "Don't worry about that." The voice smiled. I could hear it, though there was no warmth. "Just wrong. Just open the door." "I'm here," I swallowed. My hand clenched the phone so tightly I thought I'd break it. I looked toward the hallway. Empty, quiet, no footsteps. No shadows moving. I laughed nervously, trying to shake it off. Maybe I was tired, maybe it was the drive. My heart refused to calm. The phone rang again. I didn't pick it up. But the whisper came anyway, echoing through the receiver even without the line being picked up. "Open the door. I'm here." I tried rationalizing. Maybe it was someone from the front desk, calling on a new system. Maybe it was a prank from another guest. I grabbed the menu, reading quickly, trying to focus on the words. The room felt smaller. The air thick, heavier than it should be. Then it happened. The lights flickered. Just once. Enough to make the shadows in the corners move unnaturally. I looked at the door. Nothing. The hallway was empty. I tried to breathe. Tried to calm myself. Another ring, and the voice again. "I'm inside now." My hand shot to the doorknob, locked, deadbolt secure. I backed away, almost tripping over the suitcase. My mind screamed, trying to reason. How could anyone be inside when the lock was on? When I had just checked it? But the voice, my voice almost, was clear as day, coming from somewhere right behind that door. I backed toward the bed, my eyes darting around. The curtains moved slightly, though the window was shut. My stomach twisted. I wanted to call the front desk, scream for help, anything, but I couldn't. Something held me. The voice. "That wrong familiarity? Why are you doing this?" I whispered, gripping the edge of the bed. "Because you answered," it said softly. "You always answer." The hairs on the back of my neck stood. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't obey. The phone rang one last time. I picked it up with trembling fingers. "Open the door," it said. "I've been waiting." I swallowed hard. My hand shook as I fumbled with the lock. I didn't want to open it. Part of me didn't want to live if I did. But curiosity and terror and some irrational thread of obedience pulled me forward. I opened the door an inch. The hallway was empty. Nothing. Just the dim light from the next room. No shadow, no sound, nothing. I shut it quickly, heart hammering. My hands were shaking so badly I couldn't breathe. The phone sat on the bed, silent now, as if nothing had happened. But the feeling lingered. Someone, or something, had been here, watching, waiting, and the voice, that voice was mine. Or nearly mine. I backed away from the door, trying to tell myself it was over, that I was imagining things, but the memory of the voice stayed in my head. Each word replayed over and over, slower, deliberate, taunting. "Open the door. I'm here." I sat on the bed, pulling my knees to my chest. The lights hummed above, the air conditioner clattering in the corner, and yet I felt eyes on me. From the doorway, from the walls, from the phone itself. I wanted to leave. I wanted to call someone. But the idea of leaving this room, stepping into that hallway where the voice waited, I couldn't. Something was holding me here, keeping me prisoner with that whisper. That wrong familiarity. Time passed. Or maybe it didn't. I couldn't tell. Each second stretched impossibly, like the air itself was thickening, pressing against me, whispering with that same wrong voice. You answered. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't move from the bed. My phone sat silently on the side table, though I couldn't look at it without remembering the voice, its cadence, its unnatural familiarity. Morning came eventually, though it didn't feel like it. The sun spilled weakly through the curtains. I checked the lock, then the door, then the hallway. Nothing. No one. No whisper. No voice. But the memory remained. Sharp. Clear. Almost alive. I could hear it when I closed my eyes. Soft. Coaxing. Demanding. "Open the door. I'm here." I didn't. I couldn't. Not yet. And deep down, I knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being followed. Not by a person. At least not in the way that made sense. The hallway outside my room stretched and paled. Uneven light, longer than it had seemed before, corners bending just slightly, as if the walls themselves were moving. I pressed my back to the wall, trying to steady my breath, and that's when I heard it. Footsteps, soft, deliberate, coming from down the hall, slow, steady, echoing off the walls in a way that made my chest tighten. I told myself it was another guest, a staff member, someone checking the rooms. But it didn't sound like anyone I knew, and it didn't stop. I stepped toward the sound, trying to tell myself I was imagining it. But the steps paused when I paused, quickening when I quickened. It was like the hallway itself was alive, guiding me, luring me deeper. "Hello?" I called, my voice shaking. No answer. Just the echo of my own words, bouncing unevenly off the walls. I rounded the corner, expecting a figure to appear. But the hallway was empty. Nothing but closed doors, some slightly ajar, some perfectly shut. And yet, I could still hear the footsteps, closer, moving with me. I tried my room key in the lock, thinking maybe I could hide. But as soon as I turned back, a door at the end of the hall slammed shut, sharply, echoing through the corridor. I jumped. My heart pounded so loudly I thought it would give me away. The footsteps started again, coming from the far end. I froze. My legs trembled. Each step was deliberate, slow, impossibly rhythmic, like someone or something was counting me. I wanted to run back to my room, slam the door, lock it, but my body moved against my will, toward the sound. The hallway stretched as I walked. I swear it stretched. Doors that had been close now seemed farther away. Light flickered along the walls, shadows bending into strange shapes. I passed a room, 312, and the door creaked open just slightly. A sliver of darkness inside shifted like someone inside had moved. I squinted. Nothing. Just the hallway reflected in the glass. Another step. I flinched. Then another. The footsteps mirrored my pace perfectly. Not in front, not behind, but alongside me. I couldn't see anyone. Not a shadow, not a figure, not even a shape in the reflections. I reached the elevator at the end of the hall. Doors closed. I pressed the button. Nothing. Pressed it again. The lights above the elevator flickered, dimmed, and went out, leaving me in uneven, trembling light. And still the footsteps continued. I turned, trying to pinpoint the source. The sound came from everywhere and nowhere at once. The hallway, twisted slightly in my vision, bending at angles it shouldn't. I could see my own reflection in the polished floor, but it wasn't right. My legs moved slower than they should, my arms lagged behind me, my head turned too quickly, and the footsteps, they didn't match me anymore. They were ahead, but not, moving faster than physically possible. I ran. My shoes slapped against the carpet, echoing loudly. The footsteps followed, keeping pace, sometimes behind, sometimes beside, always there. I passed doors that slammed open, then closed immediately, as if the hallway itself were breathing, alive, trying to guide me somewhere. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't know why I was following, only that the footsteps had a voice behind them. Not words, exactly, just a sense, a feeling that I had to go forward. I tried stopping, but my body refused. The hallway twisted again, longer, darker, and I realized there was no turning back. A door opened in front of me, wide this time, spilling dim yellow light into the corridor. I hesitated. Something inside me urged to step inside. Something whispered. The footsteps slowed, paused, waiting. My heart thudded. I stepped forward. The room inside was empty. Ordinarily empty, but not empty the way a normal room is. The shadows here moved against the light, sliding along walls and floor. The door behind me slammed shut. My pulse raced. I spun, pounding on it, screaming, but it wouldn't budge. And the footsteps? Still there, echoing inside me, around me, inside the walls. I backed away from the door, trying to find another exit. But the hallway outside had changed. It stretched farther, longer than it had when I entered. Doors I hadn't seen before lined the walls, numbers I didn't recognize. The light flickered unevenly, and still. The footsteps. I followed them, though I didn't want to. My mind screamed at me to stop, to turn back, to escape, but the hallway guided me. The footsteps paused when I paused, quickened when I moved, leading me through a twisting, impossible corridor. I passed mirrors set into the walls. My reflection was wrong. Sometimes it lagged, sometimes it moved ahead. And in one mirror I saw a figure, crouched, tall, thin, and featureless. It mimicked me perfectly, even though I had never moved yet. My breath hitched. The footsteps stopped. I froze. The figure tilted its head. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. Then the footsteps started again. Faster this time, louder, echoing through the distorted hallway. I followed blindly, almost hypnotized. Each step made me feel like I was sinking into the carpet, swallowed by the motel itself. My hands scraped along the walls for guidance, for stability, but the walls pulsed under my touch, alive, breathing. I passed room 318. The door was open. A faint light spilled across the hallway, showing a shadow moving inside. It wasn't human. Or maybe it was. I couldn't tell. I wanted to look away, but my eyes were drawn, trapped, glued to the darkness inside. A door behind me slammed. Another door. Another. All around. The hallway twisted more now, longer, bending impossibly with no end in sight. The footsteps echoed around me, inside my skull, not just the carpet, inside me. I couldn't run. I couldn't stop. I could only follow. At some point, I realized I was crying, tears running down my face, and I didn't care. My shoes made dull slapping sounds, my breath ragged. The footsteps were no longer outside me. They were inside me, beating with my heartbeat, moving with my pulse, urging me forward. I passed a small service cart abandoned in the hall. The silver tray on top rattled, though no one was near. A faint whisper followed, almost under my breath. "You're almost there." I backed away instinctively. The footsteps mirrored me, faster, louder, insistent. I stumbled, my hands grasping at the walls. The hallway bent again. The doors seemed to grow taller, larger, impossibly high. I could see the ceiling stretching above me like a dark sky, and at the far end, the light, a door, pale yellow spilling into the distorted corridor. The footsteps stopped just before it. The hallway went silent, except for my own ragged breathing. I wanted to turn back. I wanted to leave, but something about the light, something about the silence, pulled me forward. I stepped toward it. And that's when I realized the footsteps weren't leading me anywhere. They were keeping me here. They were keeping me moving, guiding me deeper, not out, not anywhere safe. The door loomed ahead. I could hear my own pulse in the walls, in the carpet echoing, matching the rhythm of something unseen behind me. I reached out for the handle, and the whispers started again. Soft, deliberate, almost human. Come closer. You can't leave. I froze, my hand trembling inches from the doorknob. And for the first time, I understood. The hallway didn't exist the way I thought it did. It wasn't a passage. It wasn't a way forward. It was a trap, a loop, a guide. And the footsteps weren't anyone else's. They were mine, or almost mine. Echoing ahead, behind, inside me. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run, but I couldn't. My body moved forward anyway. I stepped through the door. The hallway behind me vanished. The footsteps stopped, and the light swallowed me whole. I ran down the hallway, heart pounding, hands shaking so badly I could barely hold my key. My room, my only escape, was supposed to be right at the end, just a few steps ahead. But when I reached the door, I realized something was wrong. The lock stared back at me, cold metal gleaming under the flickering lights. I inserted the key, twisted. Click. Nothing. I tried again. Click. Still nothing. My fingers trembled as I pressed harder, jiggled it, cursed. The key wouldn't turn. My mind raced. Maybe the lock was broken. Maybe I was too panicked to use it correctly. But no matter what I tried, it refused. I stepped back. That's when I noticed the hallway. It had changed. Slightly. Just slightly. At first I thought it was my imagination. But then the walls seemed farther apart, stretching, twisting. The ceiling lifted. The lights flickered and pulsed, stretching along the hall like they were alive. My room, the door I had just come from, was gone. Replaced by a blank wall, I swallowed hard. My pulse thundered in my ears. I turned, searching for another door, another exit. But every turn I took, the hallway stretched further. The carpet seemed endless. The walls leaned inward, then outward, bending in ways that made my stomach lurch. I could feel it watching, the motel itself shifting, guiding me into something I didn't understand. I tried another key from the key ring, thinking maybe the wrong one had been used. Same result. The locks wouldn't open. My panic surged. My breaths came in short, ragged gasps. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run. But the hallway didn't end. Every step I took was mirrored by another hallway, stretching infinitely ahead and behind. I passed doors I didn't recognize. Some opened, revealing empty rooms with beds neatly made, lamps glowing warmly, inviting. Others opened into darkness so deep I couldn't see the floor. Every time I tried to enter, the door either vanished or slammed shut before I could cross the threshold. I ran again, faster. My shoes slapped against the carpet, echoing in the endless corridor. The locks, my key, nothing worked. The hallway twisted, turning on itself in ways that should have been impossible. It didn't feel like a building anymore. It felt like a living thing, a predator. The lights flickered, and I saw them. Shadows moving along the walls. Not human shadows, longer, thinner, impossibly tall, bending over the corners of doors. They didn't just move. They slithered, stretching, watching, waiting. I couldn't escape their gaze. Every time I turned, they seemed to be closer, just at the edge of my vision. I reached another door. I tried my key. Click. Nothing. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped it. The key skidded across the carpet, but when I bent to pick it up, it was gone. vanished. I stared at the floor, blinking. My pulse raced. My breath caught in my throat. The hallway stretched further. I could see doors in the distance, impossibly small now, almost toy-like. They were lit by a pale yellow glow. My instinct told me to run to them. My mind screamed to stop, but my legs moved on their own. I ran toward them faster, though my lungs burned and my legs screamed. One door loomed larger than the others, closer now. I ran to it, tried the key again. Click, nothing. I pounded on the door, my fists raw. The hallway behind me seemed to pulse, dark shapes pressing against the walls, following, closing in. Whispers echoed, soft, deliberate. Not words I could understand, just a feeling, a warning. A lure. I stumbled back, my hands pressed against the door. And then I saw it. My reflection, in the polished metal of the door handle. But it wasn't me. Not really. My eyes were wider, darker. My mouth twisted in a silent scream. I raised a hand, and the reflection raised its own hand ahead of me before I moved. It was waiting, watching, learning. I stumbled away from the door, down the stretching hallway. The carpet under my feet seemed to ripple like water. The walls breathed, expanding and contracting. The ceiling arched impossibly high, dark patches forming shapes, faces, hands reaching toward me. The locks, the doors, my key, they all mocked me. None would work. None would open. I tried to scream. My voice echoed back, distorted, coming from the walls themselves. I ran faster, every step leading me deeper. But the hallway never ended. Each door I passed warped, numbers changing. 312 became 318, became 325, then 301. Impossible sequences. I tried doors at random, turning the handle, jiggling keys, nothing. Then I heard it. A soft whisper right behind me, close enough to feel the breath on my neck. Why are you running? You're already here. I spun. Nothing. Just the endless hallway, stretching into darkness and flickering light. My chest heaved. My legs ached. My hands shook. And yet something deeper, darker, tugged at me, pulling me forward. I saw a door ahead. The glow from beneath it pulsed like a heartbeat. Desperate, I ran. Tried my key again. Click. Nothing. I pounded. I screamed. And then the door slid open on its own. Not slowly, but abruptly, silently. The glow spilled across the warped carpet. Shadows leaned away, making space. I froze at the threshold. The room beyond wasn't a room. It was a void. Pale light, impossible angles, walls stretching and twisting in ways my mind couldn't comprehend. And inside, figures, shadows of people, tall, thin, featureless, but somehow familiar. They stood perfectly still, watching me. I could see myself among them, reflection wrong, eyes wider, smile crooked, silent. I wanted to step back. My instincts screamed. But the hallway behind me, the one I had been running down, was gone. The walls pressed close, corners bending. No escape. I was trapped between the impossible corridor and this room of shadows. A whisper reached my ears, soft, deliberate, almost human. Don't try to leave. You're ours now. I staggered forward, half panic, half curiosity. My reflection among the shadows mimicked me exactly. Every twitch, every blink, every heartbeat. They weren't just watching me. They were learning me, copying me, waiting for me. The hallway stretched endlessly behind me. The door vanished. My key lay forgotten somewhere, lost, useless. I was alone, and yet surrounded. Surrounded by mirrors of myself, shadows, whispers, impossible geometry. I stumbled inside the room. The figures didn't move, but the air thickened, pressing in, heavy, as if the building itself were breathing around me. I could hear my pulse in the walls. My own voice repeated in whispers. "You can't leave," I screamed. The sound echoed endlessly, folding back on itself, coming from the shadows, from the walls, from the endless hallway that didn't exist. I tried doors, locks, keys. Nothing. Every step I took led me deeper, not out. And then I understood, not just understood, felt it in my bones. The motel wasn't just a building. It wasn't just walls, doors, keys. It was alive, shifting, feeding, learning, and I had been trapped inside it the moment I entered. The hallway stretched. The locks remained unyielding. The doors mocked me. My key, useless. And I realized then, in a cold, undeniable certainty, I wasn't going home. Not tonight. Not ever. I don't know how long I wandered. Hours? Days? Time didn't exist in the motel anymore. The hallways stretched endlessly, twisting in impossible angles. The doors mocked me. My key was useless. Shadows leaned from the corners, silent, patient, waiting. And the whispers never stopped. You can't leave. You're ours now. I ran. I tried to run. But every step led me deeper, not out. Every door I passed warped. Numbers changed. Rooms I hadn't seen before opened to impossible spaces. Darkness that seemed to swallow light, corners that bent, ceilings that arched impossibly high. Every mirror reflected me, but never quite right. Eyes darker, mouth twisted, movements delayed, ahead, behind. I was everywhere and nowhere at once, and then I heard a sound I'll never forget. Soft, mechanical, a faint static, like a phone line buzzing far away. I stopped. The hallway ahead pulsed in yellow light, the walls stretching closer, then further. I stepped forward cautiously. The sound grew. Whispering, distorted, familiar. Hello? Hello? I froze. The voice, my voice, but older, different, slower, deliberate. I ran forward. The walls leaned over me. The ceiling rose impossibly high. The floor rippled beneath my feet. And then ahead, a door. It glowed pale yellow, soft but impossible. I reached for it. My hands trembled. The voice came again, clearer. Hello? Is anyone there? I pressed my ear to the door. It was a recording. Someone, me, speaking. The words were faint, as if from long ago. My heart thumped violently. How could this exist? I hadn't recorded anything. I hadn't called anyone. Yet the words were mine. I tried the door, locked. My key, of course, still useless. The whispers rose, overlapping the recording, swirling inside me, pushing me forward. Come, you belong. You can't leave. I stumbled down another corridor. The footsteps followed. Not mine this time, or maybe they were. I couldn't tell. The motel had taken all bearings, all reason. The hallway twisted and stretched endlessly. Every door I tried either vanished or became something impossible. One room opened to an empty void, then the walls twisted and trapped me inside another corridor I hadn't seen before. I kept moving, kept running. My body was exhausted, shaking, lungs burning. And then I heard it again, the recording. My voice calling out, desperate, almost a whisper. Hello? Hello? Anyone? The realization hit me like a punch. That wasn't just a recording. That was me, or someone who had been me, or would be me. Time had no meaning here. I was trapped inside this building, and perhaps I had always been trapped. I ran toward the sound, following the voice. Shadows leaned in from the walls, twisting toward me, taller, thinner than any human should be. Their faces were blurred, featureless, but I could feel their intent. Patient, hungry, watching, learning. The hallway stretched further. I turned, tried another door, tried to open a window. Nothing. Everything refused to obey the laws of reality. The key was gone from my hand, vanished, just like all my previous attempts at escape. Then I saw it. A faint light at the far end, brighter than any other glow. The whispers rose, urgent now. Come closer. You can't leave. I ran. Faster than I thought possible, though my legs ached. The hallway twisted around me like a living thing, walls bending, floors rippling. Every reflection in the mirrors along the walls showed me just slightly wrong. My face elongated, my eyes darker, my mouth stretching into a silent scream. The light ahead grew, and then I was in a room, pale yellow, glowing softly. And the recording, the voice of me from long ago, was clearer than ever. Room service. Yes, I'm here. Anyone there? I screamed, my own voice overlapping, echoing, distorted, folding back on itself. The shadows pressed closer, reaching, leaning, flowing like liquid darkness. I tried to run. My legs moved, but the walls bent to stop me. The door behind me vanished. There was no escape. I fell to my knees, exhausted, terrified. And I realized it then. This wasn't a building. It was alive. It had been patient, collecting me, folding me into itself. My voice, my movements, my terror. It recorded, repeated, replayed endlessly. I had been trapped from the moment I arrived. The whispers spoke my name. My voice called out again and again from years ago, from now, from everywhere, and then silence. When the police arrived weeks later, the motel was abandoned. Doors unlocked, windows open, no one inside. No furniture moved, no sign of me. Not a trace. The lobby smelled faintly of carpet cleaner and air freshener, just like the first day I arrived. But the phones? The phones still worked. One officer picked up the front desk receiver. A recording played. My voice, clear, precise. Recorded years ago, saying the same words I had whispered in that endless corridor. Hello? Hello? Room service? Yes, I'm here. Anyone there? The officer frowned. There's no one here, he said. This call, it's old. Years old, but I knew better. I was there, somewhere, waiting, watching. My voice trapped in the motel, repeated endlessly, folded into the walls, the doors, the shadows. I couldn't leave. Not ever. And I realized with bone-deep certainty that the motel never forgets. It remembers everyone who enters. It keeps them. It teaches them. Shapes them. And every new guest, every new arrival, adds another echo to the recordings, another whisper to the walls, another shadow to the corners. The police left, shaking their heads. The motel waited, patient, silent, watching. And I, trapped inside its endless loops and impossible corridors, knew one thing. The next guest would hear my voice, answering, calling, whispering. Room service. Yes, I'm here. Anyone there? And I would be there, watching, waiting, guiding them, slowly, inevitably. Because the motel doesn't let anyone leave. Not really. Not ever. I don't remember how I first came across the building. Maybe it was the turn in the road that seemed too sharp, or the way the fog clung to the edges of the street like it was trying to hide something. I know I didn't plan to go inside. Nobody plans to go inside places like this. But something in the air, or maybe just in me, made me cross that threshold. The front door was heavy, the kind that groans as though it resents your intrusion. Dust rose when I pushed it, motes dancing in the weak sunlight spilling through grimy windows. The air smelled of old paper, mildew, and a hint of smoke that might have been decades old. I ran my hand along the banister and felt a sticky residue, like the house itself had been sweating for years. I wasn't expecting to find anything. Most of my work as a paranormal investigator had been about documenting claims, interviewing witnesses, recording noises that science couldn't explain. I had tools, cameras, audio recorders, EMF meters, all of it. And yet, standing in that hallway, I realized that none of that mattered here. This place had its own rules. I wandered through the main floor, furniture draped in yellowed sheets, chairs like frozen ghosts in the corner of rooms, mirrors that reflected the dust but not me. That made my skin crawl more than any shadow ever could, and then I saw it. A small desk in what might have been the reception area. On it, a single book, leather-bound and cracking at the spine like it hadn't been touched for 100 years. It seemed ordinary enough except for the way it radiated. Something. A quiet insistence like a whisper pressing at the edge of your hearing. I opened it. The pages were brittle, the handwriting delicate and precise. Looping letters that almost seemed to sway on the paper. Dates and names filled the pages. The first few lines were normal. Names I recognized from local history, visitors who had stayed in the town's old inn decades ago. But then I noticed the first anomaly, a date, February 31st, 1927. My eyes darted back to the page. February 31st. I blinked. No, I wasn't misreading it. The page was filled with dates that did not exist. And next to them, names. Names that should have been impossible. I leaned closer, squinting. One name in particular caught me off guard, Eleanor Crowe. I didn't recognize it, but something about it pricked at the back of my mind. Eleanor Crowe? The name seemed to echo in my head, faint and distant, like it belonged somewhere I'd never been but somehow remembered. I flipped forward, careful not to tear the pages. More names, more impossible dates. Some of the names matched townsfolk I knew, people who were alive, whose families I'd spoken to just last week. And then there were names that didn't exist anywhere outside these pages. I searched my phone, whispered the names aloud, but nothing came up. No records, no mentions, nothing. I felt the first real shiver of fear. Not the kind you get when you watch a horror movie. Not the kind that fades when the lights come back on. This was something different. Heavy, rooted. My fingers trembled as I turned another page. A new date. June 45th, 1933. Next to it, a simple note. The guest stayed longer than expected. Nothing else. The line made my stomach twist. What did it mean? How could someone stay longer than time itself allowed? I tried to rationalize. Maybe it was an old hotel record kept by a prankster, someone who loved the absurd. Maybe this book had been part of some art project gone wrong. But every rational thought collided with the sensation crawling over my skin. The air was heavier here, thicker, almost tangible. My pulse quickened. I read on. Names like Thomas Gray, Marjorie Flint, A.L. Winters, some familiar, some completely alien. Each accompanied by dates that twisted logic. March 0th, 1919. November 33rd, 1950. Every line was a quiet rebellion against the world outside these pages. Then, in the middle of the book, I found something different. A photograph yellowed and curling at the edges. A group of people standing in front of the inn, or at least I assumed it was the inn. Faces blurred, not like a bad camera, but like someone had tried to erase them from memory. And in the corner, scrawled in the same delicate handwriting, "They never left." I froze. I ran my fingers along the photograph as if touching it could explain the impossible. And then I noticed something familiar, a shadow, just at the edge of the group. It wasn't clear, but it was shaped like a person. A tall figure hunched slightly. And then it hit me. The posture, the tilt of the head. I knew that stance. I had seen it before. Or maybe I had always known it. My breath came fast. I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to admit what my mind was suggesting, but somewhere, deep in the part of me that didn't lie, I recognized it. Someone or something was watching through the pages, through time, through the names that never should have existed. I set the book down. The desk seemed to hum faintly, as if the leather cover had lungs and it was breathing, and I realized, with a creeping dread, that the book wasn't just a record. It was alive, in its own way, and it knew I was here. I stepped back, my fingers brushing the edge of the desk. A loose page fell. I picked it up. Another name, written in ink that looked fresher than the rest. Ivy Langley, September 12th, 2025. My pulse stopped for a moment. That's today. Today. And yet the rest of the page was filled with other names. Names that had never existed. Names that weren't supposed to exist yet. The room seemed to tilt. I felt dizzy, my legs weak. The air grew colder, though no windows were open. My rational mind screamed that I was imagining things, that it was a trick of perspective, of stress, of heat or cold. But another part of me, the part that always knew things it shouldn't, knew better. This book, it didn't just record visitors. It summoned them, or claimed them, or both. I tried to close the book, to push it aside, to tell myself that the sun would rise and I'd laugh about this. But my hands were frozen, and then I noticed the smallest detail. A name, written in almost invisible ink at the very bottom of the page. Do not forget to write your own name. I laughed nervously. My own name. Ridiculous. The house was old, dusty, playing games with me. And yet, the ink seemed to burn against my skin when I touched the page. I pulled my hand back as though it had been scorched. I backed toward the door. I had to leave. I had to get out. The book could stay behind. I could pretend none of this had happened. I could tell myself it was just dust and old paper, imagination and fatigue, and then I felt it. A presence. Not behind me, not in front of me, but all around. It was patient, quiet, unblinking. It didn't breathe, but it existed. And it was waiting. I bolted. Down the hallway, past the draped furniture, past the mirrors that refused to reflect me. Out the door. The sun was lower now, bleeding through the fog in sharp, cold shafts. My heart hammered, my lungs burned. I didn't look back, but I couldn't stop seeing the pages. The names, the dates that weren't there, the shadows in the photograph. Eleanor Crowe, Ivy Langley, and the faint, impossible whisper, "Do not forget to write your own name." I swore I would never go back. But deep down, I knew the book wouldn't let me keep that promise. It waits. It waits in the dust, in the quiet corners, in the spaces between days that don't exist. And one day, if I'm not careful, I'll find my own name written in it. I shouldn't have gone back. I knew it the second I touched the doorknob of that abandoned inn again. But something inside me, the part that's always chasing proof, always hunting what shouldn't exist, couldn't stay away. The air was colder than before, or maybe I was colder. My breath came out in faint white puffs, twisting and fading into the shadows that crowded the hallway. The sun had gone entirely now, leaving the rooms dim gray, as if the world had forgotten how to shine here. I carried the guest book in my arms like a living thing. Leather warm from my hands, its pages humming faintly. I told myself I was going to study it, record the names, and leave. But every step toward that old desk was a step deeper into something I could feel crawling beneath my skin. I set the book down. The pages opened almost on their own, as if the air itself had remembered where to turn. I stared at the names. Eleanor Crowe, Ivy Langley, and dozens more that I'd never seen before, though they were written in the same precise, looping handwriting. I whispered one aloud. Just one. Thomas Gray. The moment the name left my lips, I froze. Footsteps, slow, measured, coming from somewhere deep within the building. Not behind me, around me. They circled, careful, like someone pacing a large room. I held my breath, heart hammering against my ribs. But when I turned, the hallway was empty. Nothing moved. The air was still. I tried another name. Marjorie Flint, a distant cry. High-pitched, almost childlike, echoing from upstairs. I didn't recognize the sound, but it made my stomach knot and my chest tighten. The echoes lingered, bouncing off the walls, stretching and twisting like the sound had no clear source. I dropped the book. It fell open, pages fluttering as though caught in a wind I couldn't feel. My hands shook and I pressed my palms over my ears, but the sounds didn't stop. Every name I whispered, every line I read, brought something new. Footsteps behind walls, doors creaking, whispers too soft to understand. I realized, with a sick twist of my gut, that the book was listening. That it had been waiting for me to read the names aloud. And each name had a response. I tried to reason with myself. It's all sound, acoustics, stress, imagination. But then the footsteps came closer, and I could feel them press against the soles of my feet. Not real, I told myself. But my body disagreed. I backed into the corner, holding the book to my chest. My eyes scanned the room. The mirrors now reflected more than dust. They reflected movement. Shadows darted just out of frame, too quick to catch, too fluid to name. I whispered another name, A.L. Winters, and the air shifted. The cries intensified, layering over one another, distant but all-encompassing. I could feel 100 voices pressing against me, and I couldn't distinguish which were human, which weren't. The book vibrated in my hands, almost breathing, alive and furious. I stumbled backward, hitting the wall. My hands clutched the pages. I read another name, just a whisper, Eleanor Crowe, and then I heard it. A soft, deliberate whisper back, not in my ears, but in my head. My own voice? Not my voice? I couldn't tell. It said, "Why are you here?" I dropped the book. It landed open on the floor, pages splaying like wings. And for a moment, silence. Absolute suffocating silence. I felt the walls close in, the floor tilt beneath me. And then the whispers began again. Names I had read. Names I hadn't read. Voices overlapping, twisting together, calling, begging, warning. I grabbed the book again, fingers trembling, trying to close it, slam it shut, anything. But it resisted, the pages fluttering as if a wind blew from inside them. And the voices, they didn't just whisper. They laughed. Quietly, dryly, cruelly, almost like the book itself was alive and mocking me. I stumbled backward, pressed against the far wall, and that's when I noticed the handwriting changing. New lines appearing as I watched. My pulse stopped. One by one, names I didn't know, written in a darker ink, sharper than the rest. Each name caused the air to shiver. My skin crawled. My ears rang with a distant, hollow sound. I tried to leave. I tried to stand, to run for the door. But every step toward the exit felt heavier, as if the floor itself was swallowing me. Footsteps followed me, perfectly timed, echoing my own. And the whispers, they became voices, more insistent, more personal. They spoke directly to me, murmuring secrets I didn't understand, fears I hadn't named. I collapsed to the floor. My hands covered my face. My ears rang. And then, in the overwhelming chorus, I heard a single clear voice. My name. I froze. It wasn't spoken aloud. Not in the room. Not in my head. It was a thought, threaded into my mind like a needle pulling at the fabric of my sanity. I didn't want to say it, didn't want to call it, but my lips moved anyway. Ivy Langley. The instant the words left my mouth, the room shifted. Shadows lengthened unnaturally, stretching along walls and across the floor. The temperature dropped, and somewhere in the back of the building, a door slammed shut with a sound that made my bones ache. The book's pages turned on their own. One name glowed faintly, almost phosphorescent in the dim light. Mine. I stumbled backward, heart in my throat, breathing fast and shallow. My name, written there. I had only spoken it in fear, not expecting it to appear. And yet it was there. I had to leave. I had to escape before whatever this was got worse. But when I tried to stand, I noticed something worse. Names were appearing faster now. Hundreds of them, scrolling across pages like the book was alive, cataloging everyone who had ever entered its walls and everyone who ever would. The whispers grew louder. Not just the voices of strangers, but voices I knew. Friends, family, people I'd spoken to over the phone. They called my name, pleaded, warned, and then laughed cruelly as though they had never been real at all. I ran to the door. I wrenched it open, gasping, but the hallway stretched endlessly. Not normal hallways, hallways that twisted back on themselves. Shadows clung to the walls, flickering and darting, impossible angles where the ceiling met the floor. I could hear it behind me. Footsteps, whispers, names, all mingling in a chaotic symphony. My own voice screamed through the chorus, I want to leave! But the book, it was waiting for me, and I realized finally what it had been doing. Not recording, not observing, summoning, inviting, demanding. I fell to the floor, clutching the book, trying to cover the pages. My fingers traced names I had read, names I hadn't, names I would never speak aloud. And then, with a final, terrifying clarity, I understood. Every name I spoke aloud became a voice, a presence, a whisper in the dark. Every name was a key. Every name chained someone to this place. And now, with my own name written there, I was no longer a visitor. I was part of it. Part of the book. Part of the whispers, the footsteps, the endless shadows. I don't know how long I stayed there. On the cold floor, heart pounding, breathing shallow, listening to names calling and laughing and crying all at once. Time had no meaning here. Days, minutes, maybe hours passed. Or maybe it was all one long, unending moment. And still, I whispered. I read. I called out names in fear, curiosity, and desperation. Each one made the room tilt more, made the shadows sharper, made the air press harder against my chest. Ivy Langley, Thomas Gray, Eleanor Crow, Marjorie Flint. Names repeated, layered, growing into a wall of sound that pressed into my skull. And in the middle of it all, a faint, quiet whisper threaded through the chaos, calm and patient. Do not forget to write your own name. I knew then that I could never leave this place. Not truly. Not without leaving myself behind in ink on those brittle pages, in the echoes of names whispered at night. I should have left. I should have run the moment the whispers started, the moment my name appeared in the book. But leaving wasn't that simple. The building, it didn't let people go. Not really. Not once it had chosen you. I remember the first step I took toward the door. My legs were weak, trembling, the floor beneath me uneven, warping in ways that defied reason. Every step I made, the hallway seemed longer, stretching on endlessly. Shadows flickered at the corners of my vision, shapes bending where no shape should exist. And the book, oh, the book, was in my hands again, heavier than ever, humming, vibrating with the sound of 1,000 whispers. I didn't want to look at it. Not really, but I couldn't stop. My own name stared back at me from the open page, Ivy Langley. Written in black ink, darker than the rest, sharper, as though it had been carved into the page rather than written. And beneath it, another line appeared as I watched. "Your story begins now." I swallowed hard. My throat burned. My pulse roared. I wanted to leave, to escape this impossible place. But something deep in me, the part that had always sought the truth, always chased what shouldn't be, wouldn't let me run. And then I heard it. A voice, not from the book, not from anywhere I could place. My own voice, whispering, distant, but perfectly clear. "I'm here." I looked around the room. The furniture, draped in yellowed sheets, seemed to move subtly, like it breathed. The air was thick and cold. Dust swirled at my feet in slow eddies, almost alive. And the shadows, they weren't shadows anymore. They were shapes, faceless figures leaning just beyond my vision, watching, waiting. I stumbled backward, tripping over the desk, nearly dropping the book. It hit the floor with a thud that echoed endlessly, though there was no sound in the world beyond this place. I scrambled to my feet and tried to run. The hallway stretched on forever. I couldn't tell if I was moving forward or if the building was moving around me. The walls pulsed, breathing. Doors that hadn't been there before lined the corridor. Mirrors reflected rooms that didn't exist, and everywhere whispers. Hundreds of voices, all calling my name, all demanding, all warning. I tried to speak, to tell them to stop, but my voice caught in my throat. The whispers penetrated my mind, threading themselves through my thoughts, through my memories. Names I had read aloud, names I hadn't. Faces I had never seen, now etched into my memory. And in the center of it all, one voice, calm, patient, unyielding. "Do not leave until your story is written." I collapsed against the wall, gasping. My hands found the book, clutched it as if it were a lifeline. The pages fluttered violently, then stilled. And then, impossibly, the ink began to move. Not just my name, but words forming beneath it. My thoughts, my fears, my memories. Lines that I hadn't written yet, flowing from the pen of something else, something alive. I watched, horrified, as the book wrote my story. The day I had entered the inn, my hesitation, the fear I had tried to bury, the way the building had called me here, how it had waited for me. And then, deeper truths, things I had never admitted even to myself, regrets, fears, moments of weakness, all spilling onto the page as if the book knew me better than I knew myself. And then the ink stopped. A single line appeared beneath all the others. "You belong here now." I felt it in my bones. This was no longer a record, no longer a book. It was a trap, a prison. And I, myself, had become part of it. I tried to leave. I ran. I screamed. I shouted my own name, trying to assert my existence outside of this place. But the hallways twisted endlessly. The shadows leaned closer. The whispers became a chorus, overlapping, layering into a wall of sound that pressed into my skull. I stumbled into a room I hadn't seen before. A small, dimly lit space. And there, on a table, another book. Smaller, older, the pages cracked with age. I realized with a sinking dread that it wasn't just the one guest book. There were more. Hundreds, maybe thousands, each containing the names of those who had come before me, each recording their fears, their lives, their deaths. I forced myself to look at one. The ink was faint, but I could see it. Names, written one by one, their stories unfolding beneath the letters. And then, impossibly, I saw a line that made my blood run cold. "The guest has arrived, Ivy Langley." I turned back to my own book. My name glowed faintly, almost like it had been burned into the leather cover. I could hear the whispers again, now inside my head, insistent, patient. "Write. Record. Do not leave." I tried to resist. I told myself I could fight, that I could tear the pages, destroy the book, anything, but my hands were no longer mine. They moved of their own accord, fingers tracing the lines, the ink forming under my touch. My own story spilled onto the pages. Every thought, every memory, every fear, written in a script that wasn't entirely mine, yet somehow was. Hours, or minutes, or days passed. I don't know. Time had no meaning. The book consumed it all, and with each line written, the room grew colder, darker, more alive. Shadows swirled around me, reaching, pressing, waiting. I felt myself fading, merging with the pages, becoming a part of the whispers, the footsteps, the endless chorus of names, and then I saw it. A line, new, fresh, darker than all the rest. Next guest to arrive, Ivy Langley. My stomach dropped. I knew then that leaving was impossible. That the building, the book, the shadows, they didn't just record the past. They demanded the present. They waited for the next story, and my story, my life, was no longer mine. I fell to my knees, my forehead pressed against the floorboards. The whispers surrounded me, layering over one another, calling my name, laughing, crying, pleading. I couldn't tell if they were inside my head or in the walls, in the air, in the very dust. I could feel my own presence dissolving. My hands, still clutching the book, were becoming nothing more than extensions of it. My thoughts, my memories, were etched into the pages, permanent, eternal, and all I could do was watch, powerless, as the guest book recorded me completely, without mercy, without pause. The last thing I remember before it fully claimed me was the whisper, calm, patient, cruel. Do not forget to write your own name. I had no choice. I did not want to, and yet I did. Because it was waiting, and because the book had always been waiting. Now I exist in the whispers, in the shadows, in the footsteps that echo through the hallways of the inn. My name appears in the book, and the ink never fades. It records me eternally, along with everyone who came before and everyone who will come after. Outside, the world continues unaware. But here, inside the walls, time does not exist. And the guest book waits. Always, always. And someday, someone else will find it, and they will hear my voice, faint and patient, guiding them, whispering their name. Do not forget to write your own name. The sky was bruised when I first saw it, a deep, rotting purple stretching across the desert horizon. I'd been driving, for hours, the kind of long, endless stretch that makes your mind fray at the edges, and then the lightning started. Not the lazy, distant kind, but sudden, violent arcs that split the world in half. Each flash painted the sand white, the shadows of the cacti twisting into shapes I didn't want to name. I spotted the motel almost like it appeared out of nowhere. Its sign flickered weakly, neon blue buzzing in the rain that had just started to fall. I slowed, then stopped. My hands trembled on the wheel, not from cold, but from some other, harder fear. Something in the air made my skin crawl, electric, wet, almost hungry. I got out and slammed the door behind me. The rain was sharp against my face, cutting through my jacket. Lightning struck again, closer this time, and I swear the motel itself seemed to shift, like it had drawn a breath. I shook my head, telling myself I was imagining things. A storm makes people see things. That's all. The lobby was dim, the smell of mildew and dust thick in the air. The receptionist wasn't there, just a bell on the counter, trembling slightly as if it had felt the storm too. I rang it, and the sound echoed, hollow, too loud. I could hear water dripping somewhere far away. The place felt too big. When a man finally emerged from a back hallway, he was older than he should have been. His eyes were pale, almost reflective, and his smile was slow, forced, like it had learned how to appear human. "Room?" he asked, his voice scratching the air. "Yes, just one night," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. He handed me a key without looking at me. The key was heavy, solid, cold in my hand. I noticed as I walked toward the stairwell that each flash of lightning outside seemed to make the walls pulse. Not literally, but almost. Like the building was breathing. I reached my room and closed the door, leaning against it, breathing hard. Outside, the storm was building. Thunder rolled like a living thing, circling the motel, shaking the windows. I went to the window and stared. The desert was no longer empty. The lightning revealed shadows, shapes that didn't belong, darting just beyond the reach of the light. I rubbed my eyes. Nothing, but the unease didn't leave. The first strike hit the ground maybe 50 feet away. The light was so bright I could see the texture of the asphalt, the small rocks scattered across it. Then came the sound, a tearing, hollow crack that made my chest vibrate. I felt my heartbeat in my throat. The motel seemed to respond. I swear the walls leaned slightly toward me. I wanted to leave. I really did. But outside, the desert had turned into a nightmare. Rain pooled in odd shapes, reflecting the neon flicker of the sign. Every flash of lightning seemed to drag the motel further into some reality I didn't understand. I sat on the edge of the bed, listening to the storm. Each flash made the shadows dance across the room, my lamp, the bed frame, the chair, but sometimes, in the corner of my eye, I saw shapes that weren't mine. I blinked. They were gone. I tried the bathroom, needing something ordinary. The faucet dripped slowly, rhythmically, but when I leaned closer, the reflection in the mirror didn't quite match me. My eyes looked a little too wide, my mouth twitching in ways it shouldn't. I laughed nervously and stepped back. Then the lights went out. I froze. Darkness settled like a living thing, pressing against my skin. The storm outside didn't stop. If anything, it got worse. Each crash of thunder made me flinch. And then I heard it, the walls groaning. Not settling, not the building reacting to wind, but groaning, soft, deliberate. Like the motel was alive and shifting, listening. I grabbed my phone. No signal. Of course. The kind of place that pulls you in always has no signal. I wanted to call someone. I wanted to leave. But even the thought of stepping into the hallway made my stomach tighten. Every flash of lightning outside made the shadows stretch further, like the motel was mocking me. I couldn't sleep. I didn't even try. Instead, I moved around the room, touching the walls, feeling the subtle vibrations under my fingers. Sometimes they were warm, sometimes icy, but always alive. The air smelled different after each strike, ozone and something older, rustier, like metal left to rot. At one point, I thought I heard footsteps. Light, quick, almost playful. Outside my door, I held my breath, every nerve screaming. The steps stopped. I listened. A drip from the ceiling somewhere else in the room. My heartbeat. Then a faint whisper. Maybe my mind, maybe not. I tried to focus on normal things. The bed was normal. The lamp, the chair. But every time I blinked, everything shifted slightly. A little too far to the left, a little too high. The motel was stretching, morphing, responding to the storm, or maybe it had always been like this. Lightning struck again, closer this time, and for a brief moment, I saw it. The wall opposite the bed had a face pressed into it. Just for a fraction of a second, and it vanished. I told myself it was a trick of light, but the memory didn't fade. The shape had smiled. Hours passed. Minutes, maybe. I lost track. The storm outside was relentless. Inside, the motel throbbed, breathed, whispered. I talked to myself, argued with the air, begged the storm to pass, but no one answered. I tried to rationalize it all, telling myself the isolation, the heat, the endless desert had finally broken me. But when lightning struck again, illuminating the room in stark white, I saw the outlines, shapes, crawling just beneath the surface of the walls, shadows that shouldn't move, faces that weren't mine, eyes that watched. I blinked. Gone. The storm didn't care about my fear. It didn't care if I slept, if I cried, if I prayed. It raged, and the motel raged with it. I could feel it, through the floorboards, the walls, the ceiling. Alive, waiting, patient. By morning, if it could be called morning, light gray and dripping, the storm had eased. The desert stretched out, calm, innocent, lying. I left my room cautiously, the key cold in my hand. The lobby was empty. The bell still trembled. I stepped outside. The motel loomed behind me, silent, solid, dead. But I knew better. I had seen the pulse, felt the walls breathe. The storm had passed, but the motel remained awake, waiting for the next lightning strike, the next lost traveler. I drove away slowly, my hands gripping the wheel until my knuckles whitened. The desert was quiet now, but every so often, between the stillness and the wind in the sand, I could swear I heard it. A whisper, low and pleased, carried across the road. And I knew deep down that it had been watching me all night. The hallway smelled like wet concrete and old paint. I hadn't left my room for long, just to get some water, but the air outside the door felt heavier. The storm from the night before had left everything damp, the desert rain soaking through the walls in a way that made the building feel even more alive. I told myself it was just water, just the building settling, but every instinct screamed otherwise. That's when I saw the footprints. They started at the end of the hall, wet, dark, and impossibly precise. Bare footprints heading toward my room. My chest tightened and my throat went dry. I counted them. Each step was measured, deliberate, as if someone, or something, knew exactly where I would be. I swallowed, trying to convince myself it was a trick of the light, leftover water from the storm. But the prints weren't random. They formed words. Leave. The letters were smeared slightly, as if the water itself had shaped them, bleeding across the floor and wall. I backed up slowly, trying to make sense of it. My mind scrambled. Was it another guest? Impossible. The motel had been empty, silent save for me. Was it my imagination? Maybe. But the floor beneath me felt colder than it should. I ran to the door to my room. It was locked. I didn't remember locking it. I jiggled the knob, heart hammering. Inside, nothing had changed. The bed, the chair, the lamp, all normal. But outside, in the hallway, the message had grown. More words stretching toward the stairwell. Don't look back. I froze. The hairs on the back of my neck rose. I wanted to run, but the hallway stretched endlessly, longer than it should have been. Each flash of light from the storm clouds still lingering outside made the shadows twitch, like the building itself was alive and laughing softly. I turned slowly, expecting someone to be there. Nothing. Only the damp carpet and the low hum of the motel settling. But when I looked back down the hall, the footprints were moving. Not moving in real time. More like they were being rewritten, leaving letters behind as they progressed. You are alone. The words burned into my memory. I should have left. I should have run, but something kept me rooted. Something beyond fear, deeper, more curious. I needed to understand. I followed the trail. It led to a room at the far end of the hall I hadn't noticed before. The door was closed, but faint light leaked from under the cracks. I pressed my ear to it. Silence. No one inside. Nothing. I tried the handle. Locked. I turned back, and the footprints had changed. Now they led toward the stairwell, then up the second floor. I could hear a soft drip, drip, drip from somewhere above me. The sound echoed, hypnotic, almost beckoning. My hands shook, but I climbed the stairs. Each step felt heavier than it should, like the building resisted me. Upstairs, the hallway was narrower, darker. The carpet squelched under my feet, damp as if someone had just walked through. The footprints were here too, fresh, wet, spreading across the walls. I leaned closer. You will see, I gagged, a cold sweat breaking across my skin. I didn't know if it was fear or nausea or both. The words weren't just written on the floor anymore. They climbed the walls, twisted around corners, a living script that followed me as I walked. I tried to rationalize. Maybe it was paint, maybe water dripping through some cracks, but the shape of the letters, the way they formed perfectly, made no sense. They weren't random. Someone knew I was coming. Someone or something knew me. I reached the end of the hallway. Another door. This one had scratches across it, deep and deliberate, forming a pattern almost like a warning. I didn't want to touch it. I didn't want to look. But I did. Inside, the room was empty. Only a single chair sat in the middle, facing the far wall. But the wall itself, I froze. Footprints were crawling up it, leaving wet, dripping letters. "The storm sees you." I stumbled back, my hands sliding across the damp walls. The words followed me, shifting slightly, almost as if they were alive, breathing, mocking me. I wanted to scream, but my voice was gone. The room pulsed with the sound of the storm outside, and for a moment, I thought I saw shadows moving in the corners. Faces, maybe, or just my mind playing tricks. The dripping didn't stop. Water fell from the ceiling, but it wasn't ordinary water. Each drop seemed heavier, colder, leaving impressions that weren't random. I realized with a shiver that the footprints weren't just wet. They were forming patterns, shapes, faces, warnings. I ran to the door, slamming it behind me, and the hallway seemed to stretch even further. Every step echoed unnaturally, bouncing back at me from angles I couldn't comprehend. I reached the stairwell and descended quickly, desperate to get to the lobby, to the exit, to anything resembling safety. The lobby was different. The bell still sat on the counter, trembling. But the walls were alive now, wet streaks forming letters faster than I could read. I blinked, and the messages changed. "You can't escape." The receptionist was gone. No sound, no movement. Only the dripping, only the wet footprints, now swirling around the room like a storm of their own. I could feel eyes on me, though I knew there was no one. The building watched. The storm outside had become a part of the motel, or maybe the motel had always been part of the storm. I tried to leave, to push open the front doors, but they didn't budge. The rain outside had stopped, but the storm inside had only grown. Shadows lengthened, shapes formed, and the footprints traced across the walls in a frenzy. I pressed myself against the counter, trying to calm down, to breathe. Each flash of lightning that had lingered in my mind from the night before came back, sharp and white, and in that light I saw them. Faces pressed into the walls, fleeting but real, their mouths opening in silent screams. I blinked, and they were gone, but the feeling remained. The hallway behind me shifted. I could hear the soft squelch of wet footprints approaching, slow, deliberate, circling. I didn't dare look, but my mind filled in the details. Whoever or whatever was here, they weren't human. They didn't breathe, didn't blink. They only watched. I ran toward the office at the back of the lobby, hoping for a phone, a bell, a sign of life. But the office door was locked, and I didn't have the key. Behind me, the footprints formed one last message before I turned away. "It knows your name." I froze. My hands went clammy, my stomach dropped. How could it know? I hadn't told anyone I was here. I hadn't spoken to anyone. Yet somehow the motel knew. The storm knew. And the footprints. They weren't just warnings. They were promises. I spent the rest of the night walking the halls, following and avoiding the messages at the same time. They changed whenever I wasn't looking, moving like living things. Some spelled warnings, some left symbols I didn't understand. Every so often, I thought I heard whispers, carried through the damp air, almost familiar, almost my own voice. By morning, the footprints had vanished, but their presence lingered. The walls were wet, the carpet still damp, and I just knew that the motel hadn't finished with me. The storm was gone outside, the desert calm, innocent. But inside, the motel waited, patient, hungry, knowing. I left my room, staring down the hall one last time. No footprints, no letters. Only the faint echo of what had happened, a whisper in the damp air, promising it would return, and somewhere deep in my chest, a voice told me it already had. I couldn't sleep again. The footprints, the words on the walls, they haunted me. Even in the quiet moments, I felt the motel watching, breathing, waiting. Something told me that hiding in my room wouldn't save me. I had to see. I had to understand. I went back to the lobby. The front doors were still locked, unyielding. The receptionist was nowhere to be seen. The air smelled heavier, damp and metallic. I noticed a door at the far end, one I hadn't paid attention to before. It was marked Office, plain and unassuming. I tried the handle. Locked, of course. I knocked. Nothing. Whispering. The faint sound of a storm, though outside, the desert sun was bleaching the sand. The air inside felt thick, electric, alive. I felt drawn to it. I had to see what was behind that door. I circled the lobby looking for a way in. There was a small window, dusty and streaked with rain from last night. I pressed my face to it. Inside, the room was dark, cluttered with desks, chairs, and walls lined with radios and recording devices. The hum of electricity, or something else, filled the air, low and insistent. I found the key on the counter. I didn't know why it was there. I hadn't seen it before. My hands shook as I turned it in the lock. The door opened with a quiet click that sounded too loud in the silence. Inside, the office smelled of old electronics and ozone. The walls were lined with shelves, each shelf crowded with radios, tape recorders, stacks of papers, and folders. Every surface was covered in wires, blinking lights, and devices that hummed as if alive. I could feel the motel pulsing beneath my feet, responding to the presence of all this technology. I walked closer to a desk. A recorder was running, a faint hiss coming from the speaker. I pressed play, a voice. My voice, screaming. I stumbled back. My own voice, recorded, filled the room. But it wasn't just screaming. It was fear, pure and unfiltered, echoing through the speakers in every direction. I grabbed another recorder, pressed play, and there it was again. Me. Different moments. Different rooms, different times, but always me. Always terrified. I sank into the chair, my hands shaking. How could this be? I hadn't screamed like this in the motel. Had I? The recordings were too vivid, too alive. The fear was real. It wasn't a trick. It was me, but not. I moved to another desk. A folder was open, filled with handwritten notes, scribbles, sketches. Maps of the motel, hallways, rooms, every detail, every corner. Even the places I hadn't noticed. The walls, the staircases, the office itself. And then I saw the file labeled with my name. I froze. My name, written in messy, hurried handwriting, stamped across the page. Inside were transcripts, recordings of me, my voice, my steps, my thoughts. Every call I had made, every whisper I had uttered since I arrived. How could this be? I hadn't spoken to anyone. I hadn't left my room much. Yet here it was all documented. I ran my fingers over the paper, my breath shallow. The office seemed to pulse around me, the lights flickering in time with my heartbeat. Outside, though I couldn't hear it, I felt the remnants of the storm. The motel itself had become a conduit for something beyond comprehension, something that knew me intimately. I leaned closer to one of the radios. The voices weren't just mine anymore. Snippets of calls, screams, warnings. Voices that hadn't belonged to anyone I recognized. Some sounded human. Others, something else. Garbled, distorted, overlapping. They filled the room, whispers that crawled along the walls, over the floor, under the ceiling. And then I noticed the monitor on the desk. A screen flickering with grainy images, shadows moving through the halls. Rooms I had been in, rooms I hadn't seen. And in every frame, a figure, myself, moving, sometimes screaming, sometimes silent, always terrified. I stumbled back, knocking over a stack of tapes. They scattered across the floor. I heard a soft laugh, not my own, low and pleased. I spun around. The room was empty. Yet the laughter persisted, echoing in the walls, in the hum of the machines, in the very air. I wanted to leave. I wanted to run, to throw the door open and escape the motel, escape this nightmare. But the key was gone. I checked my pockets, empty. The desk drawers, empty. The office had swallowed it, or the motel had. The building had decided I couldn't leave yet. I sat back in the chair, shaking, trying to make sense of it. Every tape, every recording, every device, it wasn't just documenting me. It was predicting me. My screams, my fear, my thoughts, they were all already here. Had I done this before? Would I do it again? Was I trapped in a loop? A nightmare written by the motel itself? I grabbed another tape recorder, pressed play, and this time I heard myself in the hallway outside my room. Footsteps, wet, deliberate, moving closer. The words I had seen written on the walls the night before, "Don't look back. You are alone," echoed in the recordings. I realized then that the motel had been listening from the beginning. Not just watching. Listening, recording, feeding on fear. The storm, the walls, the rooms, they weren't just alive. They were sentient. They knew me before I even arrived. I felt a chill crawl up my spine. I had to see it all, had to understand. I moved closer to a wall lined with radios. Each one crackled to life as I approached, playing snippets of screams, whispers, my own voice repeating. The air was thick, charged. My skin pricked with static. The motel humming under my fingers, vibrating like a living thing. Then I saw the glass window in the corner of the office. Reflections, but not mine. Faces pressed against the glass, pale, twisted, grinning. Some familiar, some impossible. They didn't speak, but I knew they were watching. Each flash of lightning in my memory made them sharper, more distinct. The motel had trapped not just me, but echoes of everything that had passed through it. I was part of its collection now. I backed away from the window, nearly tripping over a pile of cords. The recordings were everywhere. Screams, whispers, my own words twisting into forms I couldn't comprehend. The office felt endless, like it stretched beyond the walls. My mind reeled. Time felt wrong. I wasn't just in the room. I was part of the recordings, part of the building, trapped in the hum of every machine, every wire, every whisper. The door slammed shut behind me, hard, deliberate. I ran to it, shaking the handle. Locked. My own voice screamed from a recorder on the desk. Another tape hissed to life, a whisper. "You can't escape! Not now! Not ever!" Panic overtook me. I grabbed a stack of tapes, threw them to the floor. Machines flickered, lights dimmed, shadows crawling across the walls. The room seemed to bend, pulse, thrum with life. The motel had claimed me, and I could feel it in my chest, in my bones. I sank to the floor, trembling. I couldn't leave. I couldn't escape. And I realized something worse than fear. I had always been here. Somewhere in the recordings, I had always been screaming, always been terrified, always been alone. The office was a map of my own mind, my own fear made real, and the motel was patient. It would wait until I understood the depth of my own helplessness. Hours passed, maybe minutes. I couldn't tell. The recordings continued, a cacophony of voices, of screams, of whispers. And somewhere deep in the hum of the office, I understood a horrifying truth. The motel had known me before I arrived, had been listening to me, shaping the storm, shaping me. I sat in the darkness, surrounded by machines, wires, recordings of myself, trapped in a place that should have been a room but was something else entirely. The motel was alive. The storm had passed, but it had left behind a creature made of walls, wires, and sound. And I, helpless, terrified, aware, was part of it now. I don't know how long I sat there. Time didn't exist anymore, only the recordings, the hum of the machines, the pulse of the building. I realized the motel didn't need to scare me anymore. I was already part of it. The office, the tapes, the radios, they were all mirrors of my own fear. And in each mirror, I screamed. The storm outside may have ended. The desert may have returned to its quiet, innocent stretch of sand and sun. But inside, in the locked office, the motel thrummed with life. Waiting, listening, recording, and I had nowhere to hide. The storm returned. Not outside, not in the desert, but inside me. The motel's walls seemed to pulse with every beat of my heart. I tried to ignore it, to leave the office and return to a semblance of normalcy, but the hallway stretched impossibly far. Every door, every corner, every shadow seemed alive, watching. I heard it first in whispers, soft and unintelligible, drifting through the vents, the cracks in the walls, through the air itself. The storm had become something tangible, a presence that filled the space around me. I could feel it pressing against my skin, brushing against my thoughts, probing my memories. I went to the window in my room. Outside, the desert was calm, the sand sun-bleached and innocent, but the glass reflected faces. Not mine, not theirs, but others. Figures I recognized and others I didn't, pressed close to the panes, grinning, screaming silently. Each flash of remembered lightning made them sharper, more grotesque. I recoiled, my hands pressed against my cheeks. The motel had become a mirror of fear, reflecting not reality, but the storm inside me. And then I heard my name. Soft, low, almost tender, carried across the hallway. I froze. I wasn't sure if it had come from the wall, the floor, the ceiling, or from inside my own skull. My heart thumped. My mouth went dry. I whispered it back, half in disbelief. "Who's there?" The name came again, sharper this time. "Your name." I stumbled back, my breath ragged, my mind spinning. The storm wasn't just a storm anymore. It knew me. It had always known me. The motel, the walls, the recordings, they weren't just alive. They were personal. Every drip of water, every flicker of light, every shadow reflected knowledge of me. My past, my fears, my smallest secrets. I backed into the hall, hoping for the lobby, for the stairwell, for anything familiar. But the hallway stretched farther than I remembered. Wet footprints formed along the walls, spelling words that twisted and reformed. "You cannot hide." The letters shimmered in the dim light, wet and alive. I tried to blink them away, but each time I looked again, the words had multiplied, creeping higher, over the ceiling, onto the doors. I turned a corner, and the room I passed reflected not the hallway but the motel itself, but wrong. The walls pulsated like flesh. Doors opened where there were none. Shadows moved, but not like shadows. They had mass, depth, weight. I realized I wasn't just walking through the motel. I was walking through its mind. A mirror at the end of the hallway caught my attention. I approached slowly, my reflection, or what should have been my reflection, blurred, then shifted. My eyes were too wide, my skin pallid, my lips trembling. Behind me, in the glass, faces crowded closer. Some familiar, some impossible. One face, a version of me, smiled with malice. I spun away, pressed myself against the wall. Every window now reflected things that weren't present. Rooms I hadn't seen, hallways I hadn't walked. The motel was showing me fragments of a reality I had never lived. Or maybe I had, in some twisted echo. The storm whispered again. My name, my fears. The worst moments of my life laid bare in a language I couldn't fully comprehend, yet understood. Every lightning flash from the night before flickered in my memory, overlapping with the new storm, making the motel tremble with anticipation. I tried the stairwell, desperate for escape, but each step seemed to stretch, each landing shifting beneath me. I thought I glimpsed the office from Chapter 3, its windows dark, filled with blinking lights, even though it should have been behind me. The motel wasn't just alive. It was rewriting itself, bending time and space to mirror the storm inside me. I stopped at a landing and pressed my hands against the railing. The air felt thick, vibrating. My name called again, this time from every direction at once, overlapping, distorted. Your name. "You cannot leave." I stumbled down another hall, the doors opening and closing on their own. Faces pressed against the walls, mouths moving silently, eyes fixed on me. Every time I passed a window, the reflection showed versions of myself I didn't recognize. Some screamed, some laughed. Some just stared, empty, patient. I realized something horrifying. The motel was no longer reflecting the storm. It was creating it, and the storm was me. My fear, my memories, my regrets, all amplified, turned inside out, made tangible by this impossible building. I wanted to scream. I tried, but my voice failed. The motel absorbed sound, turned it into movement, into whispers that scuttled across the walls. The wet footprints reappeared, forming a spiral that led me down another hallway I didn't know existed. Each step I took echoed unnaturally, bouncing back at me from impossible angles. At the end of the hall, a door stood. It wasn't marked. It hadn't been there before. I knew I had to open it. I knew I was supposed to, but my hands trembled as I reached for the handle. The storm inside me surged, pressing against my chest. I heard whispers of my past, echoes of laughter, crying, screaming. And then a voice, calm and clear, said, "The storm knows your name because it knows you." I pushed the door open. Inside was a room full of mirrors, floor to ceiling. Every surface reflected not me, but fragments. My childhood home, my parents' faces, moments I thought I had forgotten, fears I had buried. Each reflection whispered my secrets. The motel had pulled them from me. The storm had pulled them from me. I tried to step back, but the mirrors multiplied, surrounding me, bending the hallways and ceilings into an infinite maze of reflections. I was trapped in a storm of myself, every reflection screaming, crying, whispering my name. Lightning flickered in my memory, and with each flash, I saw the motel's walls pulse, breathe, and stretch. Wet footprints crawled over the mirrors, spelling words in languages I almost understood. You are the storm. You are the mistake. You are already here. I fell to my knees, shaking, unable to comprehend. The storm wasn't outside. It wasn't the desert. It was me. Every scream, every fear, every whispered secret had been collected, amplified, twisted, and now reflected back in a building that had become alive with intent. The mirrors shifted. Faces pressed closer. My name repeated endlessly. And then, from one mirror, I saw a figure. Myself. Older, worn, terrified. It raised a hand and pointed directly at me. I wanted to run. I couldn't. The hallway behind me vanished. Only the mirrors remained. Only the storm within me remained. I understood then. The motel didn't trap me. I had always been trapped. By my fears. By the storm that lived in my chest. By the reflections that waited for me to notice them. And now every step I took, every breath I drew, every thought I had, was already recorded, already mirrored, already part of the motel's pulse. I pressed my face to one mirror, desperate for understanding. The reflection stared back, smiling. Not mine, something else. Something patient. Something that had waited for me to realize that the storm wasn't coming. The storm had always been here. Inside me, naming me, knowing me, shaping me. I sank to the floor, trembling. I could feel the motel's heartbeat in sync with mine. The mirrors surrounded me. The wet footprints moved silently across every surface, spelling new words that I didn't have the courage to read. I closed my eyes. My name whispered again. I knew I would never leave. Not really. The motel, the storm, the reflections, they had claimed me. My past, my present, my fears, my regrets, they belonged here. They had always belonged here. And the storm would never end. Outside, the desert was calm, silent, beautiful in its innocence. But inside, the motel pulsed with life, watching, knowing, waiting, and I, broken, terrified, aware, was at the center of it all. I whispered my own name, and the mirrors whispered it back, louder, faster, overlapping. The storm inside me raged, reflecting, bending, consuming, and I understood that I wasn't alone. I never had been. The storm knew my name. It had always known it. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. Every reflection, every whisper, every wet footprint followed me. I tried to leave the mirrors behind, to move through the motel as if it were normal, but the building refused. Each hallway twisted, each door led somewhere new, and the hum of electricity, of life, pulsed beneath my feet. I found myself back in the office. The door had unlocked itself, inviting me in, or maybe daring me to return. Inside, the radios hummed, blinked, and crackled. The tape recorders were still running. I pressed play on one. My voice again, screaming, my own fear filling the room like smoke. I grabbed another recorder. Another tape, more of me. Different moments, but all the same. Fear, panic, helplessness. My own life. Recorded, archived, amplified by this impossible place. I sank to the floor, my back against the wall. And that's when I realized these weren't just recordings. They were live. Or not quite. Past and future tangled together. I could hear myself before I had arrived whispering my name. I could hear myself screaming in the rooms I hadn't entered yet. The motel was playing with time. I wasn't moving forward. I was moving everywhere at once. I pressed my hands to my ears. The cacophony was unbearable. Voices overlapping, repeating, distorting. And then, amidst the chaos, a singular, clear whisper. Listen. I obeyed. I let the noise fade into a single thread of sound. It led me to a tape recorder I hadn't noticed before. Its label was simple, You. I pressed play, it was me. But not the me I remembered. A me screaming, crying, begging, and then laughing quietly, almost gently. It described the motel, the hallways, the mirrors, the storm. Every detail I had seen, every step I had taken, every fear I had felt. I stopped breathing. The recording was me, but also not me. It spoke in future tense. It spoke as if I had already survived, already been trapped, already understood the motel in ways I didn't yet. The past, the present, the future, they were all here, all recorded, all broadcasting at once. I realized with a sinking dread, I wasn't just trapped in the motel. I was trapped in myself. Every scream, every whisper, every heartbeat was already captured. I was a ghost of my own fear, a sound wave in an endless loop. I stumbled through the office, knocking over stacks of tapes. Machines blinked, hummed, whirred. The recordings multiplied, overlapping, faster and faster. I could hear myself crying in the hallways, begging in the stairwell, whispering in the mirrored rooms. My voice filled every space, every corner, every shadow. I pressed my face to a recorder, trying to reconcile what I was hearing. The voice on the tape was calmer now, almost patient. It described what I feared most: being lost, being forgotten, becoming part of the motel, part of the storm. And then it said something I couldn't ignore. You are already lost. I wanted to leave, but I didn't know where to go. The office, the hallways, the mirrors, they were all alive, bending space, bending time, bending me. Every reflection showed versions of myself I didn't recognize. Older, younger, screaming, laughing, crying. All of them trapped, all of them part of the broadcast. I ran. I didn't know where. I didn't know when. Every hallway led to another office, another set of recordings, another version of me. My own voice followed me, screaming from every direction, overlapping, relentless. I stumbled into a room filled entirely with monitors. Each screen showed a hallway, a room, a mirror, and in every screen I was there, screaming, walking, sitting, hiding, staring, past and future me, trapped together. The motel had captured everything, and then I saw it. A screen showed the lobby, empty, silent. The front doors closed, and yet I was there, reflected in the window. My mouth moved, but no sound came out. The motel had folded reality onto itself. I was everywhere, nowhere, all at once. I pressed my hands to the screens. My reflection screamed back. My own face distorted. The walls behind me pulsed like they had a heartbeat. The storm inside me, the storm the motel had become, roared. I realized I wasn't alone in this. Every recording, every whisper, every face in every mirror had been a version of me. My fear had created companions. My terror had made allies and enemies. I had been broadcasting myself into eternity. I sank to the floor, curling into myself. The screens flickered. My name whispered again, now from every monitor, every recorder, every shadow. Your name. You belong here. I tried to scream. My own voice swallowed itself. I tried to move. The floor beneath me seemed to pulse, to throb, to respond. Every step I had taken, every breath I had drawn had been recorded, broadcast, absorbed. There was no escape. Not from the motel, not from the storm, not from myself. I pressed my face to a recorder one last time. The voice that came back was me, but older, exhausted, patient. It said, "You are lost. You always were. You are the broadcast. You are the storm. You are the motel." I understood. The fear, the whispers, the reflections, the recordings, they weren't warnings. They were the truth. I had been part of this system from the moment I arrived. The motel had claimed me, but more than that, it had revealed me. My own fear, my own despair, my own memories, they were now permanent, immortal. And the storm? The storm wasn't just outside, it was me. It always had been. I slumped against the monitors, letting the voices wash over me. Every scream, every whisper, every note of panic, my own and yet not entirely, surrounded me. The motel had become a living archive of me, and in that archive I existed forever. I tried to look away, tried to close my eyes, but the recordings followed. Every shadow moved, every mirror reflected me, every wet footprint traced a line I had already walked. I realized with a hollow despair there was no past, no present, no future. Only the broadcast, only me, multiplied, endless, trapped in a storm of my own making. And then the voice whispered again, soft, patient, inevitable. You are here. You have always been. You will always be. I understood then, fully, completely. The motel wasn't just alive. The storm wasn't just coming. I wasn't just trapped. I had become part of something far larger, far older, far more infinite than I could have imagined. The motel, the storm, the recordings, they were me, and I was lost forever.